The funeral home's parking lot was still full of cars when my phone buzzed. I ignored it. People had been texting condolences all day, and I couldn't handle another sorry for your loss while standing next to my husband's fresh grave. But the buzzing continued. 3 calls, 5, 7. Finally, my sister Janet grabbed my arm. Helen, you need to look at your phone. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Yamamoto. 17 missed calls. I called her back with trembling fingers. Helen, thank God, she breathed. I didn't want to disturb you at Frank's funeral, but your daughter is here with a locksmith. They're changing all your locks. The ground tilted. What? Jessica. She has a moving truck. She's putting things on the lawn. Your things. I asked what she was doing, and she said you don't live there anymore. I handed the phone to Janet, unable to speak. My daughter, my only child, was locking me out of my home while I buried her father. The drive home took 20 minutes that felt like 20 years. Janet drove while I sat frozen, watching familiar streets blur past. Frank was dead 5 days, and Jessica was already. Maybe it's a misunderstanding, Janet offered weakly, but we both knew better. Jessica had shown her true colors the day Frank was diagnosed with cancer. How long does he have? She asked an oncologist, not can he be cured, or what are the treatment options, just a cold calculation of timeline. When we pulled up to the house, my house, Jessica stood on the porch like a queen surveying her kingdom. New locks gleamed on the door. My mother's rocking chair sat forlornly on the lawn next to boxes marked Helen's junk and Jessica's neat handwriting. You're early, she said, not even pretending to show grief. I thought the reception would last longer. Jessica. My voice came out strangled. What are you doing? She descended the porch steps slowly, savoring the moment. At 35, she looked like Frank, same sharp features, same calculating eyes. But Frank had warmth behind his gaze. Jessica had only ice. I'm claiming my inheritance, she announced. Dad left me everything. The house, the accounts, the investments, everything. That's not. Frank wouldn't? Oh, what he did. She produced a document with a flourish. His will, signed last month when you were at your book club. Witnessed by his nurses. Legal and binding. I took the paper with numb fingers. There it was, Frank's shaky signature leaving everything to my beloved daughter, Jessica Marie Patterson. You poisoned him against me, I whispered. I told him the truth, Jessica smirked. That you only married him for his money. A 60-year-old woman marrying a wealthy 70-year-old. Please, the whole town knows you're a gold digger. I was with your father for 15 years. 15 years of waiting for him to die. She turned to Janet. Aunt Janet, you should take her. She's not welcome here anymore. Dad's house deserves better than a calculating widow. Mrs. Yamamoto watched from her garden, foam in hand. Other neighbors peered through curtains. Jessica had staged this for maximum humiliation. The grieving widow, locked out and homeless, revealed as the gold digger everyone suspected. Get your things off my lawn, Jessica continued. You have 1 hour before I call the police for trespassing. I looked at the house where I'd lived for 23 years. Not 15, 23. The house where I'd raised Jessica after my first husband died. The house Frank had moved into when we married because he said it felt more like home than his bachelor condo ever had. 1 hour, Jessica repeated, already turning back to the door. Find somewhere else to live, you gold digger. I did something that surprised everyone, including myself. I laughed. Not hysteria, not tears. Just a short, sharp laugh that made Jessica freeze mid-step. You're right, I said calmly. I should go. Janet, would you mind dragging me to the Marriott? I'll need a room for tonight. Jessica's eyes narrowed. She'd expected tears, begging, a scene. Not calm acceptance. That's it, she demanded. No fighting? No protests? Why would I fight? I picked up one small box, photo albums, the only things that mattered. You have Frank's will. The house is yours. Congratulations. Something flickered in her eyes, confusion, maybe even disappointment. She wanted drama, and I wasn't providing it. Don't forget this. She tossed my purse onto the lawn. Dad canceled your credit cards yesterday. Changed the bank accounts too. Hope you saved some of that gold you were digging for. I picked up my purse with dignity I didn't feel. Thank you for letting me know. Janet drove me away while Jessica stood on the porch, clearly unsettled by my reaction. In the rearview mirror, I watched my ex-daughter-in-law, take possession of what she thought was her prize. At the Marriott, I paid for a room with my personal credit card, the one Frank never knew about, linked to my separate account. Janet hovered, wringing her hands. Helen, this is insane. We need to contact a lawyer, contest the will. Frank wasn't in his right mind. Frank was completely lucid, I said, unpacking my photos. The cancer hadn't reached his brain. He knew what he was doing. Then why? Because Jessica convinced him I was a gold digger. She's very persuasive when she wants something. I smiled at a photo of Frank and me at Niagara Falls. She gets that from him. You're being too calm about this. Am I? I pulled out my phone. Excuse me, Janet. I need to make a call. She left reluctantly. I dialed a number I knew by heart. Morrison, Krensky and Associates. The receptionist answered. Hi, Brenda. It's Helen Winters. Is Paul available? Mrs. Winters. I'm so sorry about Frank. Let me put you right through. Paul Morrison had been my lawyer for 30 years since my first husband died. He handled that estate, my mother's estate, and various property matters over the years. Helen, his warm voice filled the line. I've been expecting your call. How are you holding up? About as well as expected. I assume you heard what happened. Small town, word travels. Jessica locked you out. Changed the locks while I was at the funeral. She has Frank's will leaving her everything. Paul was quiet for a moment. Helen, forgive me for asking, but you seem remarkably calm about this. Should I be panicking? Well, no, but most people would be. Most people didn't inherit their house from their mother before they were married. I smiled at the silence that followed. You did tell me to keep the deed in my maiden name for tax purposes, remember? Paul's laughter boomed through the phone. Helen Winters, you magnificent woman. The house is mine, has been for 23 years. Frank's name was never on it. I sat on the hotel bed, finally allowing myself to feel the exhaustion. Jessica just stole a house that was never Frank's to give. She changed the locks on your house. That's breaking and entering. Trespassing. Possibly fraud if she knowingly. She didn't know, I interrupted. Neither did Frank. He always called it our house or his house. I never corrected him. It didn't matter when he was alive. But it matters now. Yes, it matters now. We discussed next steps, legal notices, sheriff involvement, eviction procedures, the clean simplicity of property law versus the messy complexity of family betrayal. I can have her out tomorrow, Paul promised. The sheriff takes illegal eviction seriously, especially when it involves a widow. Give me tonight, I said. Let her sleep in my bed. Eat breakfast at my table. Feel like she won. Helen. I bury my husband today, Paul. The man I loved, yes, loved, despite what everyone thinks. Let me grieve tonight. Tomorrow we can deal with Jessica. That night, alone in a hotel room, I finally cried. Not for the house or the money or the public humiliation. I cried for Frank, who died believing I only wanted his wealth. I cried for Jessica, who'd become someone I didn't recognize. I cried for the family we'd been before greed poisoned everything. Frank and I had met at a grief support group. I'd lost my first husband, he'd lost his wife. We bonded over shared pain, late-night conversations, the strange guilt of finding love again. When we married, people whispered, the young widow and the wealthy widower. Gold digger, they said. Trophy wife. As if two broken people couldn't simply fall in love. Jessica had been 20 when we married. She'd smiled at the wedding, called me mom, seemed happy her father had found companionship. When had that changed? When had love turned to suspicion, family to transaction? The next morning arrived with mountain sunshine and a sense of purpose. I dressed carefully, not in funeral black, but in my favorite blue dress. War paint, Frank would have called it. He'd love me in blue. Paul met me at the courthouse where we filed the necessary paperwork. By 10 a.m., Sheriff Martinez and 2 deputies were knocking on my door, with Jessica's shiny new locks. I waited in the sheriff's car, watching through the window as Jessica answered in a silk robe I recognized as mine. Her face went from smug to shocked to furious as Sheriff Martinez explained the situation. That's impossible. Her voice carried across the lawn. This is my house. My father left it to me. Ma'am, I have the deed right here. This house belongs to Helen Winters, not Frank Patterson. You're trespassing. She's lying. She must have forged. The deed is 23 years old, ma'am. Filed with the county when Mrs. Winters inherited from her mother. Your father's name appears nowhere on it. Jessica's face crumbled. She'd been so sure, so confident in her victory. She hadn't done her homework, hadn't checked the simplest detail. She'd assumed, like everyone else, that Frank owned everything. I want to see it, she demanded. Sheriff Martinez handed her the deed. I watched her scan it, her face growing paler with each line. Helen Marie Winters, single owner, inherited from Dorothy Marie Winters, recorded 1999. No, she whispered. Then louder, no, this isn't right, Dad said. Your father can't give away what he doesn't own, the sheriff said firmly. You have 1 hour to gather your belongings and vacate the premises. My belongings? Everything here is mine. Dad left me everything. Everything he owned, Paul interjected, appearing beside the car. Which didn't include this house, or anything in it that belonged to Mrs. Winters before the marriage. The next hour was excruciating. Jessica raged, pleaded, threatened. She called lawyers who told her the same thing. You can't inherit what was never there to inherit. She tried calling Frank's attorney, who confirmed that Frank's will was valid but only covered Frank's actual assets. Which are what? Jessica demanded over speakerphone. The investment accounts, the retirement funds, his vehicle, personal effects, the lawyer listed, approximately $800,000 in total assets. That's all. Jessica's voice cracked. But the house alone is worth. The house wasn't his, Ms. Patterson. I advised him years ago to have Mrs. Winters add him to the deed, but he said it didn't matter. He trusted his wife. Trusted his wife. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Finally, Jessica emerged with 2 suitcases in her purse. Nothing else. Sheriff Martinez checked her bags. My jewelry wasn't there, thankfully. She'd already moved it somewhere, probably. Another battle for another day. This isn't over, she hissed as she passed me. I'll contest Grandma Dorothy's will. I'll prove you manipulated her too. Your great-grandmother Dorothy died when you were 12, I said quietly. You spoke at her funeral about how much you loved visiting her house. This house. You baked cookies in her kitchen. Planted roses in her garden. Jessica faltered. Memory flickered in her eyes. Summer afternoons with great-grandma Dot, learning to crochet in the front parlor, picking blackberries for jam. I'll destroy you, she said, but the venom had drained away. Everyone knows what you are. A woman who loved your father and lost him twice, once to cancer and once to your lies. I stood straighter. Yes, I suppose everyone does know that now. She fled then, tires squealing like her pain. I stood on my porch, and watched her go. Mrs. Yamamoto came over with tea and sympathy. Other neighbors followed, admitting they'd never believed the gold digger rumors, that Frank and I had seemed genuinely happy. Inside, the house felt different. Jessica had moved things, claimed spaces, left her mark. But underneath, it was still my mother's house, my house, the home where I grieved one husband and loved another. I found the rocking chair she dragged to the lawn and returned it to its spot by the window. Mom's chair, where she'd rocked baby Jessica during visits, where Frank had spent his last good days reading newspapers and complaining about politicians. The lock company came that afternoon, the same one Jessica had used, amused by the irony. New locks, new keys, new beginning. That evening, Paul called with an update. Jessica's been busy. She's already claimed Frank's accounts, filed the will for probate. She'll get what Frank left her, minus taxes and fees. Good, I said, surprising him. Frank wanted her to have it. Helen, you could fight this. Undue influence, his mental state. No, I was firm. Frank made his choice. He believed her over me. That hurts more than losing money ever could. What about Jessica? She committed fraud, trespassing. She's grieving, I said, though I wondered if that was true. She lost her father and her scheme on the same day. That's punishment enough. Paul disagreed, but I held firm. No charges, no lawsuits, just boundaries. Jessica tried, of course. She called, texted, showed up at the door. First with demands and bargaining, finally pleading. I didn't answer. The woman who'd locked me out while I buried her father had forfeited the right to my attention. A month later, Frank's lawyer contacted me. There was a letter, he said. written by Frank to be delivered after the will was executed. I met him at his office, hands shaking as I opened the envelope. My dearest Helen, it began in Frank's careful script. If you're reading this, then Jessica has finally shown you her true colors. The rune spun. I gripped the letter tighter. I know what she's been telling me. I know she thinks you married me for money. I've let her believe I agree, even changed my will to convince her. But Helen, my love, I need you to know, I never doubted you. Not for a moment. Jessica has become someone I don't recognize. Greedy, calculating, cruel. She reminds me of my brother, the one who contested Mom's will, remember? I couldn't bear to die knowing she'd torture you with legal battles. So I gave her what she wanted, knowing it wouldn't include what really mattered. The house was always yours. I was just grateful you let me share it. 800,000 should be enough for Jessica to either build a life or destroy herself. Either way, you'll be free of her. I'm sorry for the deception. Sorry for the pain this caused. But mostly, I'm grateful. Grateful you love me despite the gossip. Grateful for every morning I woke up in your mother's house, in your arms, in the life we built together. All my love. Frank. P.S. Check the attic. Behind the Christmas decorations. I left something for you. I cried in the lawyer's office, ugly sobs that 15 years of love deserved. Frank had known. Frank had chosen me, protected me, loved me enough to let his daughter hate him to save me from her greed. In the attic, behind boxes of ornaments, I found a smaller box. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a deed. Not to the house, that was already mine. This was for a cabin in the mountains, the one we'd rented for our honeymoon, where we dreamed of retiring someday. For my gold digger, the note said, who dug deep enough to find my heart. The cabin was ours, mine now. Bought with money Frank had hidden from everyone, including Jessica. His final gift, his last laugh, his way of saying what the town gossipers couldn't understand. Sometimes love is just love, even when you're old, even when you're rich, even when the world insists it must be something else. I kept the letter but never showed it to Jessica. Let her believe her father died thinking I was a gold digger. Let her live with the consequences of her greed. Frank had given her enough rope to hang herself, and she tied the noose with her own hands. As for me, I live in my mother's house, rocks in her chair, tend the roses Jessica didn't even recognize as mine. On weekends, I drive to the mountain cabin where Frank's ashes rest on the mantle, where love doesn't need to be justified or explained. The neighbors still whisper sometimes. The widow who outsmarted the daughter. The gold digger who turned out to own the gold all along. Let them talk. They'll never understand what Frank and I knew, that the real treasure was never money or houses or things. It was the quiet mornings over coffee, the shared laughter over bad TV, the held hands during chemo treatments, the love that didn't care about bank accounts or property deeds or suspicious children. Jessica got her inheritance, every penny Frank wanted her to have. But she'll never inherit what mattered, the ability to trust, to love without calculation, to see people as more than walking bank accounts. I got my house back, but more importantly, I got the truth. Frank loved me enough to play a long game that protected me even from the grave. And if that makes me a gold digger, then I'll wear the title proudly, because I dug deep enough to find a love worth more than all the houses and bank accounts in the world, even if I had to lose it to prove it was real.
The number on the screen glowed. $60,000. For 5 years I'd watched that number climb, nickel by dime, paycheck by brutal paycheck. It was my escape hatch, my future, the down payment on a small condo where no one could tell me what to do. My name is Genesis, and at 33, that number was the only thing I truly owned. I took a screenshot, a digital trophy of my discipline, and sent it to my best friend Riley with a string of champagne bottle emojis. Her reply came back instantly. Condo hunting this weekend. I'm buying the pizza and cheap bubbly. A real smile, one that reached my eyes, spread across my face. It was happening, finally. I refreshed the banking app one more time just to see the beautiful number again. It was gone. The balance read 4718. My heart didn't just drop, it evaporated. I refreshed again and again. The screen mocked me with the same pathetic digits. A pending transaction log appeared at the bottom. A wire transfer. yesterday, for the full 60,000, authorised by a joint account holder, my mother. The account was a relic from my college days, one my parents insisted we keep open for emergencies. I'd meant to close it a dozen times, but life got in the way. It was a stupid, trusting mistake, and my blood ran cold with the full weight of it. I was in my car before I even registered, grabbing my keys, driving the 20 minutes to the suburbs on pure, unadulterated adrenaline. I walked into my childhood home without knocking. My father, Donald, was in his recliner watching a golf tournament, the volume just loud enough to drown out the world. My mother, Melanie, was in the kitchen, humming as she arranged flowers in a vase. "Where is my money?" I didn't shout. The words came out low and sharp, like chips of ice. My father flinched but didn't turn around. My mother wiped her hands on a tea towel, her expression placid. "Genesis, what a surprise!" "What money, dear?" "Don't play dumb," I said, my voice shaking now. $60,000. It was wired out of my savings account yesterday, an account you are on. She sighed, a long, suffering sound she'd perfected over the years. "Oh, that. We needed to help your sister." The casualness of it knocked the air from my lungs. Help her? With what? A medical emergency? Is she okay? My sister Joanna was 25 and floated through life on a cloud of whimsy and parental funding. She was an artist who'd never sold a piece of art, a free spirit who'd never paid a bill on time. "She's fine. She's better than fine," Melanie said, a dreamy look in her eyes. She felt her aura was becoming stagnant, her spirit was blocked, so she's going on a soul-searching journey through Europe to reconnect with her creativity. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. "You gave my life savings to Joanna for an art-themed vacation?" "It's not a vacation, Genesis. It's a pilgrimage," she corrected, as if that was the part I was failing to understand. "You're so responsible, you're grounded, you'll bounce back. She needs this more. Her spirit is fragile." My father finally spoke, his eyes still glued to the screen. "It's done, Jen. We'll figure it out." "Figure what out?" I shrieked, the ice in my voice finally cracking. "You stole my down payment." "The money I have worked for every single day for 5 years. "Don't be so dramatic," Melanie said, waving a dismissive hand. "It's just money. You have a good job." She then delivered the final crushing blow. "Speaking of which, we need to talk to you about the apartment. Your father and I have decided to break the lease." I felt dizzy. "What? You can't. It's my apartment." "Our names are on the lease as co-signers," my father said, finally looking at me. His face was a mask of weary resignation. "We're just trying to limit our financial exposure right now. You'll have 30 days to find a new place." They weren't just stealing my future, they were kicking me out of my present. They were erasing me. I looked from my mother's serene, manipulative face to my father's cowardly one and felt something inside me shift. The hurt was still there, a raw, gaping wound. But beneath it, something else was crystallizing, something hard and cold. I didn't say another word. I just turned and walked out. Back in my apartment, my temporary, soon-to-be non-existent apartment, I sank onto the floor, the eviction notice and the empty bank account swirling in my head. I let myself cry for exactly 10 minutes. Then I stood up, walked to my desk and pulled out the thick manila folder containing my lease agreement. My hands were steady as I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning the dense blocks of text. And then I saw it. Clause 14b. The early termination penalty. My eyes went wide. A slow, bitter smile spread across my face. They wanted to limit their exposure. I was about to show them just how exposed they really were. The rage didn't vanish. It cooled, hardened, and sharpened into a tool. I read Clause 14b again, the dry legal language a balm to my raw nerves. In the event of early termination by the lessee, the co-signing parties are liable for a penalty equivalent to 6 months' rent, payable within 30 days of notice. 6 months. My rent was over $4,000. My parents had just signed their own death warrant. My first call was to my landlord, Bryson Morgan. He was a professional property manager, a man who communicated almost exclusively through curt emails. "Bryson, it's Genesis West in 3B, I said, my voice perfectly level. "I'm calling to give official notice that I will be vacating the apartment. My parents, the co-signers on the lease, have informed me they are breaking the agreement." There was a heavy sigh on the other end of the line. "Genesis, this is a huge headache. I'll have to find a new tenant, screen them. You understand this is a breach of contract?" "I do," I said calmly, "and I assume you'll be enforcing clause 14B. Silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head as he mentally flipped through his copy of the lease. "The early termination penalty," he said, his voice changing from annoyed to intrigued. "Yes, that's a $25,000 penalty, if I recall." "That's correct," I said. "It's to be paid by the co-signers, Donald and Melanie West. I'll forward you their contact information. I trust you'll be in touch with them to arrange payment." A slow, appreciative chuckle came down the line. "Consider it done, Genesis. I'm sorry for your trouble, but business is business. I'll have the official notice sent to them by certified mail tomorrow." My next call was to Riley. I didn't even say hello. "They took it all and they're kicking me out." "I'm on my way," she said, and hung up. 20 minutes later, she was at my door with 2 empty suitcases and a roll of packing tape. Riley, my friend since college, was the human equivalent of a weighted blanket, solid, comforting, and always there. She took one look at my face and wrapped me in a hug. "You're moving in with me," she stated. It wasn't a question. "The spare room is a mess, but it has a bed. We'll figure the rest out later." The next 3 days were a blur of cardboard boxes and the screech of packing tape. Dismantling the life I'd carefully built felt like a physical violation. Each picture frame I wrapped, each book I packed, was a reminder of the future that had been stolen. On the last day, clearing out the back of my closet, I found a dusty shoebox labelled Memories. Inside, beneath old concert tickets and faded photos, was a stack of letters tied with a ribbon. The envelopes were thin, almost translucent with age, the stamps long outdated. The return address was for a P.O. box in a city I didn't recognise. The name on them was Greta Holmes, my Aunt Greta. My mother's younger sister, the family pariah. I barely remembered her, a vague impression of a woman with a loud laugh from when I was a little girl. My parents had cut her off years ago. "She made selfish choices," my mother would say with a sniff. "She abandoned her family for her own needs." I tucked the bundle of letters into my handbag, a flicker of curiosity cutting through the fog of my anger. That night, I was lying on the air mattress in Riley's spare room, surrounded by boxes that held the fragments of my life. My body ached, my mind was numb. My phone buzzed on the floor beside me. It was an Instagram notification, a new post from Joanna. I clicked it open. The picture was of her, beaming, standing in front of the Eiffel Tower at sunset. She was holding a glass of champagne in one hand and a pastry in the other, looking radiant and utterly carefree. The stolen $60,000 was practically glowing around her like an aura, but it was the caption that made my vision go red. "Finally free to live my most authentic life. Sometimes you just have to let go and trust the universe to provide. A huge thank you to the MVPs who made this possible. Mum and Dad, you always know what my spirit needs." The universe provides. I stared at the vapid, smiling face on my screen, the Eiffel Tower a prop in the background of her grand performance of enlightenment. My universe hadn't provided. My universe had been robbed by a woman in her late 50s who preached spiritual wellness while gutting her own daughter's future. The next morning, fueled by black coffee and a cold, simmering fury, I took out the shoebox of letters. The postmarks were from over 20 years ago. The P.O. box was a dead end, but the name, Greta Holmes, was not. A quick search online brought up a LinkedIn profile. Greta Holmes, owner of a successful landscaping business in a town about an hour north. There was a phone number listed. My thumb hovered over the call button. What was I even doing? Reaching out to a ghost from a cautionary tale my mother had written. But the alternative, sitting here stewing in my own powerlessness, was worse. I pressed the button. She answered on the second ring. Greta Holmes. Her voice was brisk, professional. "My name is Genesis West," I said, my own voice sounding foreign. "Melanie is my mother." The silence on the other end was heavy, thick with unspoken history. For a moment I thought she'd hung up. "Well," she finally said, her tone unreadable. "That's a name I haven't heard in a while. What can I do for you, Genesis?" I was hoping I could talk to you, maybe buy you a coffee." Another pause. "I'll be near the city for a supplier meeting tomorrow. There's a diner off the interstate, the Blue Plate, noon. My treat." She gave me the address and hung up before I could reply. The Blue Plate was a classic chrome and vinyl establishment that smelled of coffee and fried bacon. Greta was already there, sitting in a corner booth. She looked nothing like my mother. Where Melanie was soft and curated, Greta was sharp angles and practical strength. Her hair was cut short, streaked with grey, and her hands, resting on the table, were calloused from work. She looked at me with piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. "You have your father's eyes," she said as I slid into the booth. It wasn't a compliment or an insult, just a statement of fact. Small talk felt pointless. After we ordered, I just laid it out: the savings account, the $60,000, Joanna's pilgrimage, the broken lease. I told the story in a flat, emotionless tone, the way you'd read a police report. Greta listened without interrupting, her expression unchanging. When I finished, she took a long sip of her coffee. "So, the leopard hasn't changed her spots," she said, her voice laced with a bitterness so old it had fossilized. "Just the cubs she's willing to sacrifice." "What do you mean?" "My story isn't 60,000 for a European vacation," she said, looking out the window. "It was 20,000 for my college fund. I was the first in our family to get into a 4-year university, had a small scholarship, but the rest was in a trust our parents set up. Melanie was the trustee." She paused as the waitress set down our plates. "The summer before I was supposed to leave, your father, Donald, decided he was an entrepreneur. He sank every penny he had into some harebrained scheme to sell specialty car parts. It went belly up, fast. He was going to lose everything. So, your mother did what she does best. She fixed it." I felt a familiar cold dread creep up my spine. "She took your money." "Cleaned out the entire account," Greta confirmed, picking at her salad. "Gave it to Donald to pay off his debts. She told me it was for the good of the family, that my education was a selfish luxury when Donald's future was at stake. She said I was strong, that I'd figure it out." The exact same words, the same script, dusted off and reused 25 years later. "What did you do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I packed a bag, got on a bus and never looked back. I put myself through night school, started my own business from the ground up. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was better than staying and letting her poison me." We sat in silence for a while, the clatter of the diner filling the space between us. Hearing her story didn't just make me angry, it made me resolved. This wasn't a one-time betrayal, it was a pattern. A generational sickness passed down, and I was the latest victim. As I was driving back to Riley's, my phone rang. It was an international number. My stomach twisted. It was Joanna. I let it go to voicemail, but she immediately tried to FaceTime. I accepted, my face a blank mask. Her face filled the screen, tear-streaked and panicked, with the Colosseum blurry in the background. "Jen, thank God, I need your help." "Mom and Dad aren't answering." "What's wrong, Joanna?" I asked, my voice devoid of sympathy. "My card was just declined at the hotel. I don't have any money. I'm stuck here in Rome. I need you to send me some. just until Mum fixes whatever is wrong with their accounts. Just then, a text message from my mother lit up the top of my screen. I pulled it down to read the preview. Melanie, Joanna is in a bind. We're having some cash flow issues. Can you access your emergency funds for her? She needs it. I looked at Joanna's panicked face on the screen, then at my mother's audacious text. My emergency funds, the last $1,000 I had to my name, tucked away in a separate account they thankfully couldn't touch. They had drained my life savings for a spiritual quest and were now coming for the scraps to fund the sequel. Genesis, did you hear me? Joanna's voice was shrill. I'm literally going to be homeless in Rome. That sounds like a you problem, I said, the words tasting like freedom. I ended the call and blocked her number. Then I blocked my mother's. The time for quiet fury was over. It was time for action. The next day, I took an hour off work and went to a small legal services office downtown. I paid a paralegal a flat fee to draft and notarize an official letter of demand. It was addressed to Donald and Melanie West. It cited Clause 14B of my lease agreement, detailed the breach of contract, and formally demanded payment of the $25,000 penalty within the contractually stipulated 30 days. It also stated that failure to pay would result in legal action to collect the debt, including wage garnishment and liens against property. I paid extra to have it delivered by a process server. There would be no claiming it got lost in the mail. I was at Riley's that evening, cooking a simple dinner of pasta and jarred sauce, when my phone rang. It was my father. I hadn't blocked his number. I let it ring, watching the screen with detached curiosity. It stopped, then immediately started ringing again. I silenced it and put it face down on the counter. A minute later, a text came through. Donald, Jen, we need to talk. Your mother is very upset. Call me back. I deleted it. The next morning I got an email from Bryson. The subject line was simply, Update. The body of the message was short and sweet. Spoke with Mr. West this morning. He seemed surprised. I confirmed the penalty is non-negotiable and that my attorney will begin collections proceedings on day 31. Have a great day. The panic must have been setting in. My father called again that afternoon. This time I answered, putting the phone on speaker while I continued to unpack a box of kitchen supplies. Genesis, thank God, he sounded breathless. What is this? What have you done? We got a letter from some lawyer. It's not from a lawyer, Dad. It's from my landlord. It's the penalty for breaking my lease, the one you co-signed, the one you broke. $25,000? Are you insane? He sputtered. We don't have that kind of money just lying around. Then perhaps you shouldn't have spent $60,000 of my money on a European vacation for your favourite child, I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. You wanted to limit your financial exposure. This is the cost. Your mother, she just wanted to help Joanna, he pleaded, his voice dropping. She didn't read the fine print. That's a shame, I said. I did. This will ruin us, Genesis. This will affect my retirement. Can't you just talk to the landlord? Explain the situation? The situation is that you broke a legally binding contract. He's well within his rights. I have to go now. I hung up before he could respond. I pictured him standing in their living room, the phone in his hand, the comfortable passive foundation of his life beginning to crack beneath his feet. For the first time in a week, I felt a sliver of something that wasn't rage or grief. It was power. That evening, as Riley and I were watching a movie, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown international number. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again. On the fourth try, I sighed and answered it, a grim sense of inevitability settling over me. It was Joanna, her voice a raw, sobbing mess. Genesis, why are you doing this to me? She wailed. I had to borrow money from Lucas just to eat. My card is still declined, and Mum and Dad won't answer my calls. I'm stranded. I'm literally stranded in another country because of you. Lucas. her new European fling, a guy whose Instagram was a monument to his own abs. "I didn't do anything to you, Joanna," I said. "Mum and Dad spent my house fund on you. Now they have to pay a penalty for kicking me out of my apartment. Their cash flow problem is a direct result of their choices, and by extension, so is yours." "But they did it for me," she cried, as if this was a point in her favour. "You're punishing them for helping me. You're just jealous." The accusation was so childish, so utterly predictable, that I almost laughed. "Enjoy Rome, Joanna." I hung up, and this time I blocked the number for good. The silence that followed was bliss. I let Joanna's accusation of jealousy hang in the air of Riley's apartment. It wasn't jealousy. It was a debt being called in. My parents had built their family on a foundation of my stability and Joanna's fragility. I was simply kicking out the load-bearing wall, but my father's words echoed in my mind. "Your mother is very upset." They still didn't get it. They thought this was a tantrum, a negotiation. They needed to understand it was a demolition. I spent the next hour compiling an evidence folder on my laptop. The screenshot of my $60,000 balance, followed by the one showing $47.18. The bank statement with the wire transfer to an account in Joanna's name. A picture of Clause 14B from the lease. The text from my mother asking for my emergency funds. I put it all into a single damning PDF. My extended family has a private group chat on Facebook. It's mostly used for birthday wishes and sharing pictures of grandkids. I hadn't posted in it in years. I uploaded the PDF to the group with a simple factual caption. "For anyone wondering why I've had to move suddenly and won't be at family events for the foreseeable future, here is a summary. My parents, Melanie and Donald West, stole my entire house down payment to fund Joanna's trip to Europe and then broke my lease, leaving me homeless." I hit post and turned off my phone. Riley, who had been watching me with a mixture of horror and admiration, picked up her own phone. "You went nuclear," she said, her thumbs flying across the screen. "I'm providing air support." She didn't tag anyone or use names, but her tweets were strategically vague and locally targeted. "Imagine stealing your responsible daughter's life savings to fund your flaky daughter's Insta vacation and then acting surprised when there are consequences. Family drama. Te tak karma." Another one read, "Shout out to landlords who enforce contract clauses against deadbeat co-signers. Some heroes don't wear capes." The fallout was immediate and spectacular. My phone, when I finally turned it back on, was a disaster zone of notifications. Aunts, uncles and cousins were messaging me, horrified. The family group chat was a war zone of disbelief, pity, and my mother's frantic, typo-riddled attempts at damage control. "This is a private matter, Genesis. You are airing dirty laundry and twisting the truth. We were only trying to help." The real damage, however, was happening on Joanna's Instagram. Her comment section, once a stream of fire emojis and "Yas, Queen" from her vapid friends, became a cesspool. People who knew our family or who had seen Riley's tweets and connected the dots were calling her out. Her brand as a carefree, universe-blessed traveller collapsed overnight. She was exposed as a spoiled freeloader living off her sister's stolen money. Lucas, her European fling, apparently didn't like the new aesthetic. He untagged himself from all their photos together. 2 weeks later, with the payment deadline looming, I got a call from a number I didn't recognise. It was my father. He sounded like a different person. His voice was thin, frayed. "They're going to garnish my wages, Jen," he said. No preamble. "Your landlord's lawyer called my HR department. They're talking about my pension, my work pension. Melanie and we don't have the 25,000. We spent most of our savings helping Joanna get set up." "That was a poor financial decision," I said, my voice flat. "This is my retirement," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Everything I've worked for. Please." "Just call him off. We'll pay you back, over time." You had $60,000 of my money a month ago. You could have paid the penalty and still had $35,000 left over, but you didn't. You sent it all to Joanna. You made your choice." I was about to hang up when a call came through on the other line. It was Greta. I clicked over without a second thought. "Genesis," she said, her voice tight with an emotion I couldn't place. "I have something to tell you. It's about my inheritance, or rather the one I never got." I listened, my blood running cold as she spoke. When our mother died, she left her house to both of us, to be split 50-50. I was living out of state, dealing with my own life. Melanie was the executor. She sent me a notarized copy of the will. It said everything went to her. I was devastated, but I believed it. I was the black sheep after all. It made a cruel kind of sense. She took a shaky breath. "I was cleaning out my attic last week, and I found that copy. Something about it looked off. I called the county records office where the will was filed. I had them send me the official version, Genesis. The two documents are not the same. The one she sent me was a forgery. The real will splits everything down the middle. She stole my half of our mother's house." Greta's revelation landed like a physical blow. It wasn't just my money. It wasn't just her college fund. It was a lifetime of calculated theft, hidden beneath a veneer of family and spiritual platitudes. My mother wasn't just weak or biased. She was a predator who preyed on her own blood. Armed with this final, damning piece of evidence, I drove to their house. I didn't call first. I let myself in with the key they'd never asked for back and found them in the living room, surrounded by piles of financial statements. They looked older, smaller. The serene mask was gone from my mother's face, replaced by a pinched, frantic expression. My father just looked defeated. "Heard you're having some cash flow issues," I said, my voice echoing in the tense silence. Melanie's head snapped up. The moment she saw me, her face contorted with rage. "You!" she shrieked, scrambling to her feet. "How could you do this to us, humiliating us in front of the whole family? Airing our private business for everyone to see." "My private business was the $60,000 you stole," I shot back. "You made it family business when you wired it to Joanna." "It was to help your sister. A sister is supposed to support her sister." "Like you supported yours?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous low. "I spoke to Greta. She told me about the will, the real one." The colour drained from my mother's face. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. My father looked between us, utterly lost. "What will? What is she talking about, Melanie?" "She's a liar," Melanie finally managed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Greta has always been a liar. She's poisoning you against me because she's bitter and alone." "I saw the documents from the county records office," I said calmly. "And I imagine a forensic accountant would find it very interesting to trace where the money from the sale of your mother's house went. Forgery is a felony, Mum." Donald sank back into his armchair as if his legs had given out. "Melanie," he whispered, his voice hollow with dawning horror. "You told me her mother cut her out. You said she'd disowned her." "I did what I had to do for our family," she sobbed, her defence crumbling into hysterics. "Donald, you were struggling." "We needed the money. I was protecting you." "You didn't read the lease, did you, Dad?" I asked, turning my attention to him. "You just signed where she told you to sign, just like you've always done." He didn't have to answer. The shame on his face was answer enough. He had blindly trusted her, abdicating his own responsibility, and now that trust had led them to ruin. As if on cue, the front door slammed open. Joanna stood in the doorway, looking like a refugee from a disastrous beach vacation. Her hair was a mess, her skin was sunburned and peeling, and she was dragging a scuffed-up suitcase. She looked from our stricken faces to the piles of paperwork, and her eyes narrowed. "My flight was a nightmare," she announced, dropping her bag. "I had to borrow even more money from Lucas's friend to change it. What is going on? Why is my bank account empty?" Melanie rushed to her, arms outstretched. "Oh, sweetie, you're home. Don't you worry about a thing." Joanna shoved her away. "Don't worry. My life is ruined. Everyone online thinks I'm some kind of monster. My friends won't talk to me. You told me you had it handled. You told me the money was a gift." "It was a gift," Donald insisted weakly. "Then where is it?" Joanna shrieked, turning on them. "You cut me off. You left me stranded. You ruined my reputation and my one big chance to be an artist. You're the ones who ruined everything." The perfect family, the one built on my silent sacrifices, was devouring itself right in front of me. The golden child was finally turning on her creators. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Riley. "Check your email. Urgent message from Bryson." I opened my email. The message from my landlord was brief. "Genesis, FYI. The Wests have defaulted on their payment plan. As a result, I have filed a lien against their property. The IRS has also been notified of the undeclared income from the sale of their previous property, which has triggered a freeze on their accounts pending an audit. Things are about to get very complicated for them." I looked up from my phone at the screaming match that had engulfed my family. My mother was sobbing, my father was staring into space, and Joanna was accusing them both of destroying her life. They hadn't just lost my money, they were losing everything. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. The sound of their imploding family faded behind me, replaced by the quiet hum of my car engine. I drove away, not feeling triumph, but a profound and chilling emptiness. The fire was lit. Now all I could do was let it burn. The next few months were a masterclass in rebuilding. Greta, true to her word, hired a lawyer to go after her stolen inheritance. Faced with a felony charge for forgery and a mountain of evidence, my mother folded immediately. They were forced to sell their house, the house I grew up in, to pay back the principal of Greta's share, plus decades of interest. The rest of the money was immediately seized by Bryson's collection agency to cover the lease penalty, and by the IRS to cover years of back taxes and fines. Greta was generous. She didn't need the money, she told me, but she needed the justice. She used a portion of it to help me. It wasn't a handout. It was a structured, low-interest loan. "Pay me back when you can," she said. "This is what family is supposed to do." The forced displacement from my apartment made me eligible for a first-time homebuyer grant I never would have qualified for otherwise. Between the grant, Greta's loan, and the small amount I'd managed to save since the theft, it was enough. Not for the sleek condo I'd originally dreamed of, but for something better, something real. It was a small fixer-upper on a quiet street, with good bones and a desperate need for new paint. It was all mine. My name was the only one on the deed. My signature was the only one on the mortgage. No co-signers, no joint accounts, no one to answer to but myself. The closing was on a Tuesday. I spent the afternoon sitting on the floor of my empty living room, the smell of old wood and fresh paint filling the air. I had no furniture yet, save for the air mattress Riley had let me keep. My housewarming celebration consisted of a $5 bottle of wine, a large pepperoni pizza, and the overwhelming silence of complete and total freedom. I learned about my family's fate in pieces through the family grapevine. Joanna, refusing to get a real job, had bounced from one friend's couch to another until she'd worn out her welcome everywhere. The last I heard, she was living in a women's hostel downtown, blaming everyone but herself for her situation. My parents were renting a small, grim apartment in a town an hour away, trying to survive on what was left of my father's now dwindling pension. The financial ruin was absolute. As I took the last bite of pizza, my phone buzzed on the floor beside me. It was a message from a number I didn't have saved, but I knew who it was from. My mother. "Melanie, I hope you're happy. You've destroyed this family." I stared at the words on the screen. The old Genesis would have felt a pang of guilt. The old Genesis would have felt responsible for their pain, for their poor choices, for the entire dysfunctional ecosystem they had so carefully cultivated. She would have ached with the need to fix it, to smooth things over, to sacrifice her own well-being for the sake of a hollow peace. But that Genesis was gone. She'd burned away in the fire of their betrayal. I held my finger over the screen, over the message that was meant to be the final guilt-laced shiv in my side. I thought about the years of being the responsible one, the one who never needed anything, the one who would always bounce back. I thought about the casual cruelty of their theft and the stunning hypocrisy of their outrage. They hadn't seen me as a daughter, they'd seen me as a resource, an emergency fund with a heartbeat. You didn't destroy this family, I thought. You just exposed it for what it always was. I deleted the message, then I blocked the number. I took a long sip of cheap wine, leaned my head back against the wall of the house that I built, and for the first time in my entire life, I felt truly, completely, and utterly at peace. The first Thanksgiving in my new house was a quiet affair. The walls were painted, the floors were sanded, and I had a real dining table instead of a cardboard box. My guests were Greta and Riley. We weren't a traditional family, but we were a chosen one, forged in the fires of betrayal and held together by loyalty and cheap wine. Greta had brought a turkey, expertly cooked, and Riley had brought a pie from the best bakery in town. We sat around the small table, the house filled with the warm, comforting smells of the holiday. To survival, Greta said, raising her glass. Her legal battle was officially over, the last of the settlement money transferred. She looked lighter, as if a weight she'd been carrying for 30 years had finally been lifted. And to choices, Riley added, clinking her glass against ours. Her career was taking off, and she was blissfully happy in her new relationship. She'd been my rock, my roommate, and my co-conspirator, and seeing her thrive felt like a victory of its own. We ate and talked, the conversation easy and unburdened. We didn't talk about them. We didn't have to. Their absence was a presence in itself, a quiet acknowledgement of the crater they'd left behind. I'd heard through a cousin that Joanna's latest venture was a podcast about finding authenticity after trauma. It had 0 followers. She was apparently working part-time as a barista, a job she complained about constantly. The universe, it seemed, was finally teaching her what it meant to provide for herself. My father was working extra shifts as a security guard to supplement their income, his retirement a distant, unattainable dream. The consequences of his passivity were a life sentence of weary regret. As Riley was clearing the plates, my phone, which I'd left on the kitchen counter, lit up with a notification. It was a friend request on a social media app I rarely used. The name was Melanie West, the profile picture a blurry, outdated photo of her. It was a clumsy, desperate attempt to find a way past the wall of blocked numbers. A new message popped up before I could decline. Melanie, Genesis, I know you hate me, but I'm still your mother. I miss my daughter. I stared at the screen, the words blurring slightly. The rage was gone, replaced by a vast, tired sadness. There was a part of me, a small, childish part, that still yearned for the mother I should have had, the one who would have celebrated my savings, not stolen them. The one who would have protected me, not sacrificed me. Greta came up behind me, placing a hand on my shoulder. She glanced at the screen, her expression gentle. You don't have to answer that, she said softly. Not now, not ever if you don't want to. I thought of the woman who had forged a will, who had stolen from both her daughters without a flicker of remorse until she was caught. I thought of the endless cycle of manipulation and favoritism that she called love. Forgiveness felt impossible. Forgetting felt like a betrayal to myself, but holding on to the hatred was like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. I didn't accept the request, but I didn't decline it either. I just turned the phone over and left it on the counter, a problem for another day, or for no day at all. The choice was mine. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I stood in the doorway of my living room, looking at the quiet, peaceful space I had built. Every nail, every coat of paint, every piece of second-hand furniture was a testament to my own resilience. The satisfaction wasn't loud or explosive. It was a deep, quiet hum in my bones. It was the peace of a war well fought and definitively won. The cost had been my family, my innocence, the soft parts of my heart that I wasn't sure would ever grow back. But the prize was this: my home, my freedom, myself. They said I was born strong. Fine. Strength built this home and burned theirs to the ground.
The needle felt like a tiny, angry hornet. For 10 years, that was my life. A calendar of hornets, hormone schedules, and the quiet clinical hum of a doctor's office. 10 years of my body being a science experiment that kept failing the final exam. My name is Jessica. I'm 35, and for the last decade, my family has defined me by one word: broken. The Sunday dinner table at my mother's house was my personal hell, a perfectly set stage for my weekly humiliation. The scent of roasted chicken and my mother Palmer's disappointment hung heavy in the air. Across from me, my younger sister, Nicole, glowed. At 33, she was on her second child, a walking, talking monument to everything I wasn't. Her husband, Zachariah, sat beside her, looking vaguely pleased with himself, while my husband, Matteo, squeezed my hand under the table. His touch was the only thing keeping me anchored. Liam got Student of the Month again, Nicole announced, fluffing her 4-year-old daughter's hair. And little Maya is already starting to walk. Can you believe it? She's not even 1. Of course she is, my mother said, beaming. The Lane women have always been strong, good hips, fertile. She shot a look my way, a glance so quick it was almost deniable, but I felt it like a physical slap. It was her favorite theme. Matteo's grip tightened. He was 38, 3 years my senior, and had the patience of a saint who'd married a storm. He'd held me through every negative pregnancy test, every failed IVF cycle, and every one of these god-awful dinners. "That's wonderful, Nicole," I said, my voice a carefully constructed wall of pleasantness. "You must be so proud." "Oh, we are," she chirped. "It's just a blessing. You know, to have your body just work the way it's supposed to." There it was. Not a direct attack. Never that. Just a little poisoned dart, delivered with a smile. I took a slow sip of water, picturing myself throwing the glass against the wall. Instead, I just nodded. For years, this was my role. The silent, smiling tragedy. The empty chair at the generational table. My mother, at 58, saw my childlessness as a personal failure, a stain on her legacy. She'd once told me, after our 3rd IVF failed, that maybe I was just too uptight to be a mother, as if my womb could be coaxed open with a glass of wine and a spa day. I met Matteo's eyes across the table. He gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. He knew the rage simmering just beneath my calm exterior. He also knew my secret, the one we'd been keeping for 3 long, agonizing years. They all saw me as stagnant, a story that had ended before it began. They had no idea that my world was on the verge of a seismic shift. Something was about to change, and the aftershocks were going to level this entire house of glass smiles. I let them talk, their voices fading into a dull drone of preschool triumphs and potty training woes. I thought about the long nights Matteo and I had spent filling out paperwork until our fingers cramped, the interviews with social workers that felt more invasive than any medical procedure, the thousands of dollars and oceans of hope we'd poured into a country halfway across the world. I thought about a photograph on our nightstand of a little girl with dark, curious eyes and a gap-toothed grin. "It's a shame, really," Palmer said, pulling me from my thoughts. She was looking at me again, her expression a practiced mask of pity. "All that love you have to give, Jessica. Wasted." "My love isn't wasted, Mom," I said, my voice colder than I intended. A flicker of surprise crossed her face before Nicole jumped in, a master of deflection. "Speaking of love," she said, placing a hand dramatically on her stomach. "Zach and I have some news." The table fell silent. Everyone turned to her. She looked from our mother to me, her eyes lingering on me with a particular brand of triumphant pity. "We're pregnant," she announced, her voice dripping with saccharine joy. "Number 3 is on the way." Palmer gasped, her hands flying to her mouth as tears of happiness welled in her eyes. Zachariah puffed out his chest. Mateo's hand was a rock in mine. I felt nothing but a cold, clear calm. The final piece of the puzzle had just clicked into place. "And," Nicole continued, her smile widening into a weapon, "we're having a huge gender reveal party next month. A real celebration. And of course, Jessica, you have to come." The car ride home was silent, thick with everything we hadn't said. Mateo drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I stared out the passenger window, watching the streetlights blur into long, watery streaks. Nicole's announcement echoed in my head, a smug, triumphant loop. "You don't have to go," Mateo said finally, his voice gentle. "If I don't, they win," I whispered. "Mom will call it being a sore loser. Nicole will call it being bitter." "Let them," he said, pulling into our driveway. "Who cares what they call it?" I did. That was the pathetic truth. A part of me, the part that had been conditioned for 35 years to seek their approval, still cared. He killed the engine, and we sat in the quiet dark of our garage. My mind drifted back 4 years to a sterile white room, the air smelling of rubbing alcohol and failure. It was our last round of IVF. The doctor, a woman with kind eyes and a tired smile, had just told us it hadn't worked. Again. We were out of money, out of eggs, out of hope. Later that week, my mother had cornered me in her kitchen. She'd put a hand on my arm, her touch meant to seem comforting, but feeling like a brand. "I was talking to my friend Carol," she'd said. "Her daughter had the same problem. She just learned to relax. Maybe you're too uptight to be a mother, Jessica. You hold everything in." The memory still had the power to steal my breath. It wasn't just the cruelty, it was the gaslighting. She'd made my grief into a character flaw, my body's betrayal into a personal failing. That was the night Mateo and I opened the bottle of expensive scotch we'd been saving for a positive pregnancy test. And as we drank, he brought up adoption for the first time. Not as a consolation prize, but as a different path, a better one. For the next 3 years, that path became our secret garden. We told no one. Not my parents, not Nicole, not even my closest friends at first. It was ours to protect from the blight of my family's judgment. We spent weekends buried in paperwork, evenings on Skype calls with agency coordinators, and nights worrying about court dates in a country 9 time zones away. It was a quiet, grueling, sacred process. I'll never forget the day we got the email. It was a Tuesday. The subject line just said, "Camila." Inside was a single, slightly blurry photograph. A 7-year-old girl with big dark eyes that seemed to hold the entire world's sorrow and wisdom sat on a small stool. She had a shy, crooked smile and was holding up a drawing of a yellow sun. "That's her," Matteo had breathed, looking over my shoulder. "That's our daughter." In that moment, the years of needles and hormones and my mother's corrosive whispers faded into nothing. There was only this little girl, a world away, who needed us as much as we needed her. Back in the car, Matteo reached across the console and took my hand. "What are you thinking about?" "Camila," I said, the name a balm on my raw nerves. "And that party." I looked at him, the man who had seen the ugliest, most broken parts of me and had never once flinched. The man who had learned to say, "Men seni suyemin," "I love you," in Kazakh, just so he could say it to our daughter one day. "You're right," I said, a new resolve hardening in my chest. "I don't have to go, but I think I want to." He raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? You don't have to put yourself through that." "It's not about putting myself through it anymore," I explained, the idea beginning to take shape, sharp and clear. "For years, they've written my story for me. The tragic, childless sister, the broken, bitter daughter. They've controlled the narrative." I met his gaze, my voice steady. "You told me to take control of the narrative, so that's what I'm going to do." A slow smile spread across his face. He understood immediately. This wasn't about cowering in a corner or lashing out in anger. It was about standing in the middle of their perfectly curated celebration and telling my own story, in my own words. It was about exposure. "Okay," he said, his voice full of warmth and a hint of excitement. "What's the plan?" I thought of Camilla's gap-toothed grin and the drawing of the yellow sun. My plan wasn't about burning their world down. It was about showing them the one I had been building in secret, a world they knew nothing about, and I was going to unveil it on my own terms. The 4 weeks leading up to the party were a strange mix of quiet fury and giddy anticipation. My plan felt less like revenge and more like a reclamation project. I started with the photo. It was my favorite one, a candid shot the agency had sent. Camilla was laughing, her head thrown back, a smear of chocolate on her cheek. It was pure, unadulterated joy. I had it printed on thick, upscale matte paper, the kind you use for wedding invitations. It felt substantial in my hands, real. I bought a single, heavy, cream-colored envelope to put it in. It was my secret weapon, hiding in plain sight on my desk. I finally told my best friend, Sarah, over coffee a week before the party. I'd kept the adoption from her at first, not out of distrust, but out of a desperate need to protect it from the world's opinions, even the well-meaning ones. When I laid out the whole story, the 3 years of secrecy, Camila, and my plan for Nicole's gender reveal, she just stared at me, her half-eaten croissant forgotten. "Wow," she said, letting out a low whistle. "So, you're not just bringing a knife to a gunfight. You're bringing a quiet, well-timed nuclear bomb. Is that a bad thing?" "No," she said, a slow, wicked grin spreading across her face. "It's a glorious thing. But Jess, you know what's going to happen, right? Your mom, Nicole. They're not going to send you a thank you card. You're about to light a spark in a fireworks factory." "I know," I said, stirring my latte. "I think I've been breathing in the smoke for so long, I've forgotten what clean air feels like. Maybe it's time to let it all explode." 3 days before the party, My phone rang. It was Matteo. I was at my desk, staring at the cream-colored envelope, and my heart jumped into my throat. He never called in the middle of the workday unless it was important. "Jess," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice, wide and bright and breaking through the phone. "I just got off the phone with the agency's legal team." I held my breath. "And?" "Her visa is approved. All of it. Final stamp. It's done." He let out a shaky laugh, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. "She's coming home, honey. She's really coming home." Tears streamed down my face, hot and silent. I couldn't speak. All the paperwork, the waiting, the fear, the hope, it all crested in that one perfect moment. He was right. It was done. "When?" I finally managed to choke out. 3 weeks, he said. "They're booking the flights now. 3 weeks." After we hung up, I sat at my desk for a long time, just crying. These weren't the ragged, hopeless tears I'd cried after every failed cycle. These were different. They were cleansing. This was real. My daughter was coming home. The night of the party, as I was getting ready, my phone buzzed with a text from Nicole. "So excited to see you. Don't forget a gift. We're registered, but anything pink will do. We know you don't have baby stuff lying around, so no pressure to be creative. XOXO. The winky face was the final twist of the knife. It was so perfectly her, a petty jab wrapped in a sugary shell. I read the message twice, and the last of my hesitation evaporated. I put my phone down, picked up the cream-colored envelope, and slid it into my purse. She was right. I didn't have a wrapped present. I had something much, much better. Nicole's backyard was a pastel nightmare. Pink and blue balloons fought for dominance, tied to every available surface. A banner screaming, "Tutus or touchdowns," hung over a dessert table laden with obscenely decorated cupcakes. It was exactly as saccharine and performative as I'd imagined. The air was thick with the scent of sugar and smug satisfaction. Matteo's hand found the small of my back, a warm, steady pressure. "Ready?" he murmured into my ear. "No," I said with a tight smile. "Let's do it." We hadn't even made it to the patio before my mother intercepted us. She was wearing a pale pink dress, her allegiance already declared. She hugged me, her body stiff, her perfume overwhelming. "Jessica, you made it," she said, pulling back to look me over. "You look tired, dear. Are you getting enough sleep?" "I'm fine, Mom," I said, the familiar excuse tasting like ash in my mouth. Nicole glided over, her baby bump prominent in a tight white dress. She looked radiant, and she knew it. "Jess, so glad you could come out of your cave for us." She laughed, a high, tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. She then turned to a group of her friends, women with the same glossy hair and expensive athleisure wear. "Everyone, this is my big sister, Jessica. She's our family's child-free adventurer." She said it like a compliment, but we all knew what it was. A label, a box to put me in so they didn't have to deal with the messy reality of my life. The adventurer, who never seemed to go anywhere. The women smiled politely, their eyes flicking over me with a mixture of pity and vague curiosity before turning back to Nicole, the real center of the universe. Every interaction was a small, expertly crafted humiliation wrapped in a bow of fake kindness. Zachariah gave me a brief, non-committal hug. "Glad you guys could make it," he said, already looking over my shoulder for someone more important to talk to. He was the peacemaker in theory, but in practice, he was just an enabler with a good dental plan. For the next hour, we mingled. I nursed a club soda, feeling like an anthropologist studying a strange alien tribe. I listened to conversations about sleep schedules, organic baby food, and the pros and cons of various preschools. It was a world I had desperately wanted to be a part of for a decade, and now, standing on the outside, I felt a profound and surprising sense of relief. My world was no longer about this. It was about Camila. Finally, Nicole clinked a fork against a champagne glass, gathering everyone's attention. Her face was flushed with excitement. Zachariah stood beside her, holding a large black cannon. "Thank you all so much for coming to celebrate with us," she gushed. "We are just so blessed, and we can't wait to find out if Liam and Maya are getting a little brother or a little sister." The crowd cooed. Matteo squeezed my hand, his knuckles brushing against the smooth paper of the envelope in my purse. This was it. "Okay, on the count of 3, Zachariah boomed. 1, 2, 3. He twisted the cannon with a loud pop. A massive cloud of pink smoke and glitter erupted into the air, coating the perfectly manicured lawn in a fine, shimmering dust. The crowd roared with applause. It was a girl. Another perfect little girl for the perfect little family. Nicole and Zachariah kissed dramatically as my mother wept with joy. People swarmed them with hugs and congratulations. In the chaos, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The noise, the glitter, the squeals of delight, it all seemed to be happening behind a thick pane of glass. I waited for the initial wave of excitement to die down, for the applause to fade to a happy buzz. Then I took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Excuse me," I said, my voice not loud but clear enough to cut through the chatter. A few people turned to look at me. Nicole, still wrapped in Zachariah's arms, gave me an annoyed glance. "I have an announcement too," I said. The buzz quieted. More heads turned. My mother's smile faltered, replaced by a look of wary confusion. Nicole's eyes narrowed. This was not on her schedule. This was not part of her show. The entire backyard was silent now, all eyes on me. I could feel the weight of their collective gaze, 100 questions hanging in the pink-dusted air. I met my sister's glare, and for the first time in a very long time, I didn't look away. I held the silence for a beat longer, letting the discomfort settle over the manicured lawn. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my voice, when I spoke, was steady. "For a long time," I began, my eyes scanning the crowd before landing on my mother and sister. "I thought family was something that happened to you, that it was defined only by blood, that if your body couldn't make a family, you were simply out of luck." I saw a flicker of understanding, or maybe just irritation, in Nicole's eyes. My mother's expression hardened into a familiar mask of disapproval. "But Matteo and I have learned that's not true," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "We've learned that family is something you build. It's a choice. It's about love, not biology." I reached into my purse and pulled out the cream-colored envelope. The air grew thick with tension. I walked over to Matteo, who was watching me with a look of fierce pride, and handed it to him. His hands were perfectly steady as he opened the flap and slid out the photograph. He held it up for everyone to see. A collective gasp rippled through the guests. It was quiet at first. Then it grew as people craned their necks to get a better look at the laughing, chocolate-smeared face of the little girl in the picture. "This is Camila," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. It was love and fear and triumph all rolled into one. "She's 7 years old. She loves to draw, especially yellow suns. Her favorite food is ice cream, and she's learning English by watching cartoons. And in 3 weeks, she'll be on a plane from Kazakhstan, coming home. To us." I finally allowed myself to look directly at my family. The stunned silence was more satisfying than any shouting match could ever be. I had taken their perfectly scripted party and ripped the last page out, replacing it with my own story. Nicole's face was a grotesque mask of disbelief, her perfect smile contorted into an ugly sneer. Zachariah just stared, his mouth slightly agape, looking utterly lost. But it was my mother's reaction that I'll remember forever. Her face had gone pale, all the joyful color draining away, leaving behind a slack, shocked expression. Her hand, holding a wineglass, trembled violently. Then, with a slow, almost deliberate motion, the glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the stone patio, the red wine spreading like a pool of blood. No one moved. The sound of the breaking glass seemed to echo in the sudden, absolute stillness. The pink glitter on the lawn seemed garish and absurd now. It was Palmer who broke the silence. She took a shaky step forward, carefully avoiding the broken glass at her feet. She looked at me, not with joy or confusion, but with a cold, rising anger. "Jessica," she said, her voice a low, forced calm that was far more terrifying than yelling. "This isn't the time. This is Nicole's day. This isn't the place for theatrics." The word hung in the air between us. Theatrics. After a decade of silent suffering, of being the family's cautionary tale, my greatest joy was dismissed as a performance, a stunt. "You're right, Mom," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "This isn't the time. The time for you to ask about my life, to show an ounce of compassion, was years ago. But you were too busy planning parties." I turned my back on her, on all of them. I took Matteo's hand, and together we walked away from the pink smoke and the broken glass, leaving the stunned silence of our family behind us. We didn't say a word as we walked through the house and out the front door. We didn't have to. For the first time, I wasn't running away from them. I was walking toward my daughter. The fallout was faster and more vicious than I could have imagined. Sarah wasn't wrong about the fireworks factory. 2 days after the party, my phone buzzed with a message from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. It was a screenshot of a group text. From Nicole. "I can't believe Jessica would hijack my gender reveal to announce she's buying a kid. It was so trashy and desperate. Adopting some stranger from a foreign country doesn't make you a mother. It just makes you weird." My hands started to shake. I read it again, the words burning into my screen. Buying a kid. Some stranger. She had taken the most beautiful, meaningful thing in my life and twisted it into something ugly and transactional. Other replies followed, a chorus of cousins and aunts chiming in with their own passive-aggressive sympathy and veiled judgments. Before I could even process the betrayal, my mother called. I almost didn't answer, but some masochistic part of me needed to hear what she would say. "Jessica, what were you thinking?" she began. No preamble, no hello. Her voice was sharp, accusatory. You embarrassed the entire family. You ruined your sister's special day with that stunt. My stunt, I asked, my voice dangerously low. My stunt was announcing that I'm finally going to be a mother after 10 years of hell. What was Nicole's special day? A party for her third kid, designed to remind me of everything I don't have? That is not fair, she snapped. Nicole is entitled to her happiness. This adoption of yours. It feels like a sympathy stunt. Like you're just trying to get attention because you couldn't do it the normal way. The air left my lungs. The normal way, as if my body's failure was a moral one. The years of pent-up rage, of swallowed insults and forced smiles, finally boiled over. You want to talk about normal, Mom? I said, my voice trembling with fury. Was it normal when you told me I was too uptight to be a mother? Was it normal to watch Nicole get everything she ever wanted while you told me my love was being wasted? For 10 years, you and she have treated my infertility like a character flaw. You've shamed me, pitied me, and whispered about me at every family dinner. You have never once, not one single time, asked me how I was really doing. So, don't you dare talk to me about stunts or sympathy. You don't get to. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I had never spoken to her like that in my entire life. I was only ever trying to help, she finally stammered, her voice weak. No, I said, the truth of it landing with the force of a physical blow. You were trying to make yourself feel better about having a broken daughter. Well, I'm done being your project. I'm done being your tragedy. I hung up the phone, my whole body shaking. That evening, Matteo came home to find me sitting on the floor of the nursery we had been slowly, secretly putting together. The walls were painted a soft sage green. A small white crib was assembled against one wall, and a bookshelf filled with picture books stood in the corner. He sat down on the floor beside me and wrapped his arms around me. I leaned into him and finally let myself cry. We have to cut them off, he said softly, stroking my hair. For you. And for her. Kamala doesn't need that poison in her life. She deserves better. You deserve better. He was right. Building a family with Kamala meant protecting her. It meant creating a home that was a sanctuary, not a battlefield. If that meant cutting out the people who were supposed to be my closest family, then that's what I had to do. It was a terrifying thought, but it was also liberating. Just as I was wiping my eyes, my phone buzzed on the floor beside me. It was an email from the agency, a message from Kamala's foster caretaker in Kazakhstan. My heart leaped. The email was short and written in slightly broken English. Kamala is very excited for America. She has packed her bag already, even though it is 2 weeks. She does not have much to pack. She drew you something. I attach it here. Below the text was a picture of a child's drawing. It was done in crayon on a piece of lined paper. A simple stick figure of a woman with brown hair stood next to a taller stick figure of a man. Between them, holding their hands, was a smaller stick figure with a huge, smiling face. Above them, a giant yellow sun took up the rest of the page. It was our family, and it was the only thing in the world that mattered. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of nervous energy and final preparations. We bought a car seat, child-proofed the kitchen cabinets, and watched hours of videos about helping an older child adjust to adoption. My phone remained silent. No calls or texts from Nicole or my mother. The silence was a gaping wound at first, then it slowly began to feel like a clean, healing space. The day we went to the airport, I felt like my entire body was a live wire. Matteo held my hand the whole drive, his own excitement a quiet, steady current beside my frantic one. We stood at the international arrivals gate, my eyes scanning the crowd of weary travelers emerging through the sliding glass doors. My palms were sweating. What if she didn't like us? What if this was all a terrible mistake? Then I saw her. She was smaller than I'd imagined, holding the hand of an agency escort, her big dark eyes taking in everything. She was wearing a little pink coat and clutching a worn-looking stuffed bear. Our eyes met across the bustling terminal, and for a second the whole world fell away. The escort said something to her and pointed in our direction. Camilla let go of her hand and started walking toward us, hesitant at first, then breaking into a run. She didn't run to Matteo. She ran straight to me. Her small body crashed into my legs, and she wrapped her arms around them, burying her face in my coat. I dropped to my knees, my own arms encircling her, and just held on. I could feel her small frame trembling. I breathed in the faint, sweet scent of her hair. It wasn't a perfect, cinematic movie moment. It was clumsy and raw and real. Matteo knelt beside us, his hand resting gently on her back, and the three of us stayed like that for a long time, a silent, fragile huddle in the middle of the noisy airport. The first few days were a delicate dance of getting to know each other. There were language barriers and moments of shyness. But there were also flashes of pure magic. The first time she laughed at one of Matteo's silly faces, the way she carefully arranged her few belongings in her new room, the quiet moments we spent on the floor of the living room, drawing pictures together. On the third night, she brought me the drawing she had made for us in Kazakhstan, the one of the three of us holding hands under the yellow sun. She pointed to the stick figures. "Papa," she said, tapping Matteo's figure. Then she tapped mine. "Mama." The word, spoken in her soft, accented voice, hit me with the force of a tidal wave. Later that night, after we'd tucked her into bed, I was scrolling through my phone when I saw it. Nicole had posted a new family reel on Instagram. It was a professionally shot video of her, Zachariah, and their two kids walking through a field of wildflowers at sunset, all of them dressed in coordinating white outfits. The caption read, "Some people have to fake it." So blessed that my family is the real thing. Real love. Family, first, blessed. The cruelty was so blatant, so intentional, it took my breath away. Fake it. The real thing. She was still trying to invalidate me, to invalidate my daughter. My first instinct was to throw my phone across the room, but then a different feeling washed over me. Not anger, but a cold, hard clarity. I looked over at Matteo, who was watching me with concern. I showed him the post. His jaw tightened. "Don't let her get to you," he said. "I'm not," I replied, and I meant it. I opened my own Instagram, my fingers moving quickly. I chose a photo we had taken that afternoon in our backyard. It was a simple picture of Camilla and me, sitting on the grass, her head resting on my lap as we read a book together. Her face was tilted up toward mine, and we were both smiling. It was a moment of pure, unscripted happiness. I uploaded the photo, and then I wrote the caption. For years, I was told I was broken because I couldn't have a child. I was told my love was wasted. I was told I wasn't whole. I guess broken things can still build something beautiful. Welcome home, Camila. You have made us whole. I hit post, and then I blocked Nicole's number, and my mother's. Hitting block felt like closing a door on a room that had been filled with smoke. The air in my life instantly cleared. I had gone low contact, a term that felt too gentle for the emotional amputation I had performed. In reality, it was no contact. My phone was quiet. My inbox was empty. The constant low-grade hum of anxiety I'd lived with for years simply faded away. I felt lighter, as if I had been carrying a heavy coat I didn't know I was wearing. Life became a series of small, beautiful firsts. Camila's first trip to the grocery store, her eyes wide at the sheer volume of choices. Her first snowfall, catching flakes on her tongue with uninhibited joy. Her first school picture, where she wore a bright red bow in her hair and gave the camera the same gap-toothed grin from the photo on our nightstand. Matteo and I were no longer just a couple battling infertility. We were a family, navigating the messy, wonderful, exhausting reality of parenthood. I thought about karma, not in a mystical, cosmic sense, but as a simple reckoning. My mother and sister had spent years pouring poison into my life, expecting me to just keep drinking it. When I finally refused, they were left holding the cup. Their cruelty, once it had no target, had nowhere to go but back on them. That was their burden to carry now, not mine. One night, a few months after Camila came home, a clap of thunder woke her from a deep sleep. She came padding into our room, her small frame silhouetted by the hall light, tears streaming down her face. "Mama!" she whispered, her voice trembling. I sat up and opened my arms. She crawled into bed between me and Matteo, burrowing under the covers. "It's okay, my love," I murmured, stroking her hair as she trembled. "It's just a storm. You're safe." She looked up at me, her dark eyes searching mine in the dim light. "Mommy," she said, the word clear and sure. "I had a nightmare." She called me Mama before, but Mommy was different. It was softer, more intimate. It was the word a child calls out in the dark, seeking comfort. In that moment, tucked between the man I loved and the daughter we had fought so hard for, I felt a sense of peace so profound it was almost dizzying. I was her Mommy. I was enough. A week or so later, a thick, cream-colored envelope arrived in the mail. It was the same kind I had used for Camila's photo. My stomach twisted. It was from my mother. Inside was a formal, engraved birth announcement. Nicole and Zachariah Russell joyfully announced the birth of their daughter, Charlotte Rose. There was no personal note, no message, just the cold, sterile card. It was a final, passive-aggressive attempt at a power play, a reminder of the real family I was missing out on. I looked at the card, at the perfect script and the baby's weight and length, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, not even a flicker of the old, familiar pain. It was just a piece of paper about people I used to know. I dropped it into the recycling bin without a second thought and went back to helping Camila build a castle out of blocks on the living room floor. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need their acceptance or their understanding. The revenge I had sought at that party wasn't about humiliating them. It was about liberating myself. It was about taking back my own story. I had something better than an apology. I had a daughter who saw me as her whole world. I had a home filled with laughter and crayon drawings on the fridge. That was revenge enough. The decision wasn't really a decision at all. It was an inevitability, delivered over a crackling phone line by my mother's strained voice. The new medication isn't fully covered, honey. It's thousands a month. We just don't have it. My name is Sierra Wolf. I'm 29, and until that phone call, I was a graduate student in public health, 2 years deep into a PhD program I'd fought tooth and nail to get into. My father, Dwayne, who is 58, spent his life as a contractor, hauling lumber and swinging hammers until his heart decided it was done. Now, his life was a series of prescriptions, specialist visits, and bills that arrived in thick, intimidating envelopes. "We're broke, Sierra," my mom, Livia, had whispered, the sound of quiet desperation making my stomach clench. "Your father and I. We've got nothing left." That was the cue. The unspoken question hung in the air between us. My older sister, Sarah, who is 31, had 2 kids and a mortgage. She was automatically exempt. My younger sister, Reese, 24, was a creative who floated between part-time jobs and her boyfriend's couch. That left me, the responsible one, the one who had methodically saved every dollar from scholarships, stipends, and side hustles since I was 18. "You're the one with the fancy education," my dad had said a week earlier, not unkindly, but with a weight that felt like an anchor. "You always land on your feet." Guilt is a powerful motivator. I looked at my banking app, at the number I'd watched grow for over a decade. $50,000. It was my emergency fund, my tuition buffer, my security deposit on a future I'd meticulously planned. It was everything. I hung up with my mom, took a deep breath, and transferred the entire amount to my parents' account. The confirmation screen felt like a punch to the gut. I closed my laptop, walked to my university's administrative office, and filled out the paperwork for an indefinite leave of absence. My academic advisor looked at me with pity. "Are you sure, Sierra? You're so close." I just nodded, unable to speak. My family's relief was palpable. My dad called, his voice thick with emotion, and thanked me. My mom sent a string of heart emojis. Reese, of course, took it to social media. She posted a picture of me and my dad from last Christmas, a candid shot where I'm laughing and he's smiling, looking healthier than he had in years. The caption was a masterclass in performative praise. "So incredibly proud of my amazing big sister, Sierra. When our family faced the unthinkable, she didn't hesitate. She's putting her own dreams on hold to save our dad's life, giving up everything to make sure he gets the care he needs. She's my hero, and a reminder of what true sacrifice looks like. Family first. Hero sister, proud." My phone buzzed with notifications from people I hadn't spoken to in years, all of them liking her post, commenting on how selfless I was. It felt gross. I hadn't done it for applause. I'd done it because I felt I had no other choice. I sent Reese a text. "Please take that down." Her reply was instant. "Why? People should know how amazing you are." I didn't have the energy to argue. I was too busy mourning the future I'd just set on fire. For 3 weeks, I drifted. I picked up shifts at a local coffee shop, the smell of burnt espresso, a constant reminder of how far I'd fallen. I ignored emails from my university and dodged questions from friends. The family group chat was quiet, which I took as a good sign. The crisis had been averted, paid for with my life savings. Then, this morning, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an old classmate from my undergrad program. "Hey, Sierra. Just saw this making the rounds on Facebook and thought of you. So amazing what your family is doing to help your dad. You guys are incredible." Below the message was a link. My finger hovered over it, a knot of confusion tightening in my chest. What was she talking about? I tapped it. The page loaded, and the breath left my body in a single, silent gasp. It was a GoFundMe page. The title, in big, bold letters, read, "Help Our Dad Beat His Illness," by Reese Wolfe. The main photo was one I'd taken of my dad in his hospital bed a few months ago, looking tired and frail. My stomach churned. Below it were more pictures, all of them from my camera, from my phone. There were photos of his pill bottles, a snapshot of a medical bill I'd left on the kitchen counter at my parents' house. And there, in the description, was my story. Or rather, a twisted, polished version of it, written by Reese. It talked about a daughter who was sacrificing her education, who had drained her savings to give her father a fighting chance. It used my name. It used my face. I scrolled down, my hands shaking. The goal was set at $100,000. And right below it, the current amount raised, $74,380. My eyes darted to the top of the page, searching for a date, for any kind of context. And then I saw it, right under the title. Posted 3 weeks ago, before I paid a cent. For a long moment I just stared at the screen, my brain refusing to process the information. The number, 74,381, seemed to glow. It was more than I had ever possessed in my life, and it had been raised in my name, using my story, without my knowledge. My fingers, numb and clumsy, scrolled down the page. There were updates from Reese, posted every few days. Day 5. "Wow, we're already at 20K. Your generosity is overwhelming. Dad is so touched. This will help so much with the new experimental meds the doctors are recommending." Day 12. Halfway to our goal. My sister Sierra is a rock, but this has taken a huge toll on her. Every dollar you give helps ease her burden. Thank you. Thank you. The comments section was a waterfall of sympathy from strangers. "Praying for your family. Your sister is an angel on earth. Happy to help a family that sticks together like this." I felt sick. My burden wasn't eased. My burden was the entire $50,000 I had already given them. This online performance was a complete fiction. Then I saw it. Tucked between photos of my dad were scanned images of his medical paperwork. My eyes widened in horror. They were the documents I had brought to my parents' house, the ones I had painstakingly organized in a folder on their dining room table. Reese had taken pictures of them, his diagnosis, his prescription list, his doctor's notes. My private, careful research was now public charity bait. The ice in my veins turned to fire. I didn't even think. I just hit the call button next to Reese's name. She answered on the second ring, her voice breezy and cheerful. "Hey, big sis!" "What's up?" "The GoFundMe, Reese," I said, my voice dangerously low. "What is it?" There was a beat of silence. "Oh, that! Isn't it great? I can't believe how much people have donated." "You used my name. You used my photos. You posted Dad's private medical records online." "I just thought it'd help," she said, a defensive edge creeping into her tone. Everyone was so worried. I wanted to do something. "Chill out, Sierra." "Chill out," I repeated, my voice rising despite my efforts to control it. "You've raised over $74,000. Where is it, Reese? I told you, it's to help Dad. I gave them $50,000 3 days ago. I shot back. Every penny I had. Dad's bills are paid for the next several months, so I'll ask you again. Where is the money? God, why are you attacking me? She whined. I was trying to be a good daughter. I heard shuffling on the other end, and then my mother's voice came on the line. Sierra, what's going on? Reese is upset. Mom, Reese started a GoFundMe 3 weeks ago and didn't tell anyone. She's raised thousands of dollars. Oh, that, my mom said, her voice instantly soothing, dismissive. Honey, she meant well. She's just young and wanted to contribute. Don't be so hard on her. She lied to hundreds of people. She used my sacrifice as her sob story. It's not a lie, it's just a story to get people to help, Livia reasoned, as if that made it any better. The important thing is that your father is taken care of. He is taken care of, by me. Where is the $74,000? Some of it's left. Reese's voice cut back in, sullen and defiant. We had to use some of it for expenses, for the campaign. What expenses? I demanded. The line went quiet. Reese? I have to go, she mumbled, and the line went dead. I hung up, my entire body trembling with a rage so pure it felt like a physical force. I opened my laptop and went straight to Reese's Instagram page. Her profile was public, a curated feed of brunch cocktails and filtered selfies. And there it was, posted 2 days ago. It was a picture of her and her boyfriend, Tyrese, standing on the deck of a boat. It wasn't a rental. It was a sleek, white motorboat, small but clearly brand new. They were both grinning, holding up champagne flutes. The sun was setting over a lake in the background. The caption read, "Worked hard, now we play hard. So excited for our new baby. Boat life. Summer vibes. Blessed." The comments were full of congratulations. I clicked on Tyrese's profile. More pictures of the boat. A video of him popping the champagne, with Reese squealing in the background. A receipt for the boat registration, carelessly left on a table in one shot, was dated last week. I felt like I couldn't breathe. It wasn't immaturity. It was calculated theft. She had started the fundraiser before I'd even given my parents the money, banking on my sacrifice to build her narrative. My mind racing, I went back to the GoFundMe page, searching for anything else I'd missed. I Googled Reese's name and GoFundMe. The first result wasn't the fundraiser itself. It was a link to a local online news site. The headline made my blood run cold. Heroic Daughters Viral Campaign, a beacon of hope for local family. I clicked it. The article was a glowing profile of Reese, painting her as the devoted, resourceful daughter who had taken to the internet to save her father's life. It detailed her tireless efforts, her social media savvy, her deep love for her family. And then I saw the quote, attributed to me. "I couldn't have done any of this without my sister," the article claimed I said. When I was falling apart, Reese stepped up and created this miracle for our family. She's the real hero here. I had never spoken to a journalist in my life. The rage that had been simmering inside me cooled into something hard and sharp. The trembling stopped. My mind went quiet, focusing on a single, clear objective. I wasn't just going to get the money back. I was going to burn her entire fantasy world to the ground. For the next 2 days, I barely slept. I sat at my small desk, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating my apartment. I became a digital archaeologist, digging through the ruins of my sister's lies. I took screenshots of everything, the GoFundMe page, every update, every donor's comment. I saved the article that quoted me, noting the journalist's name and the publication date. I archived every photo of the boat from Reese's and Tyrese's social media accounts, meticulously documenting the timestamps. I even found a public listing for a boat that matched theirs, sold from a local marina just last week. The price made my stomach clench. $22,000. My fury was methodical. Each piece of evidence was a brick, and I was building a case against my own sister. But I knew I was an amateur. I needed someone who understood the legal ramifications, someone who could tell me if this was just a family drama or something more. My thoughts kept circling back to one person, Cameron. We had dated for 2 years in undergrad, a serious, comfortable relationship that had ended amicably when our paths diverged. I went into public health. He went to law school. We hadn't spoken in a few years, but I knew he was working at a firm downtown. He was smart, level-headed, and a good person. Swallowing my pride, I found his number and sent a text. Hey Cam, it's Sierra. I know this is out of the blue, but I'm in a really bad situation, and I need some legal advice. Could you spare 15 minutes for a call? He responded almost immediately. Sierra. Of course. Call me now. I laid out the whole story, my voice flat and emotionless as I recited the facts, the $50,000 I gave, the $74,000 Reese raised, the boat, the fake interview. He listened without interrupting, the silence on his end a comforting presence. Okay, he said when I finished. First, I'm so sorry you're going through this. This is a lot. Is it a crime? I asked, cutting to the chase. It's wire fraud, he said without hesitation. She used an interstate electronic communication, the internet, to solicit donations under false pretenses. The fact that she used your identity and private medical documents makes it even more serious. You need to report this to GoFundMe's fraud department and file a police report. He walked me through the steps, telling me exactly what to say and what documentation to provide. Keep it factual. Dates, amounts, screenshots. Don't mention the family drama. Just the fraud. The money trail is what matters. Following his advice, I spent the rest of the day compiling a detailed report for GoFundMe. As I was attaching files, I noticed something else on the fundraiser page. Reese had been sending private messages to some of the larger donors. A few of them had posted screenshots in the comments, thanking her for the personal touch. One read, "Just got the sweetest message from Reese. She said her sister Sierra is too overwhelmed to thank everyone personally, but sends her deepest gratitude. This family is all class." The audacity was breathtaking. She was using my name as a shield, performing my humility for me while she was out buying a boat. The next day, I drove to my parents' house. I needed to see my dad, to understand what he knew. I found him in his recliner, watching a game show. He looked tired, but the immediate financial panic was gone from his eyes. "Hey, Dad," I said, keeping my voice gentle. "Sierra Bear," he smiled. "Good to see you." We talked for a few minutes about his health, his doctors. Then I took a breath. "Dad, did Reese give you any money recently?" He nodded. "Yeah, a couple $1,000. Put it right in our account. Said it was to help with groceries and things. I was so proud of her, stepping up like that." My heart sank. "Did you ask where it came from?" He shrugged, his eyes still on the TV. "She said some people online cared, said she'd started a little fund for me. I didn't ask questions. A gift is a gift." He didn't know. Or he didn't want to know. He was content with the story he'd been told because it was easier. He saw the 2,000, not the 72,000 that was missing. It was the family way. Don't ask. Don't look too closely. Just keep the peace. I left without saying another word about it. The fight wasn't with him. That evening, Cameron called me back. I have a friend who works in the fraud department at a major bank, he said. I asked him to look into the GoFundMe payout process as a hypothetical. He said the funds are typically deposited into a single, linked bank account. The name on the GoFundMe campaign has to match the name on the bank account for verification. A cold certainty settled over me. So the account was only in Reese's name. Almost certainly, he confirmed, there would be a clear electronic trail leading from the GoFundMe donations directly to her personal account. No mention of you, no joint ownership. From the bank's perspective, that money is hers, and hers alone. He paused, and I could almost hear him thinking. Sierra, this isn't just a family dispute anymore. You have enough for a case. A strong one. Armed with Cameron's confirmation, I felt a grim sense of purpose. This wasn't just about my feelings anymore. It was about a demonstrable crime. Before I filed a police report, I decided to give my family one last chance to do the right thing. It was a foolish hope, but one I felt I owed the memory of the family I thought we were. I created a group chat with my mother, my father, and my older sister, Sarah. I kept the message concise and devoid of emotion, laying out the facts as plainly as possible. I've discovered that the GoFundMe Reese started raised over 74,000 sos. I have confirmed the funds were deposited into an account solely in her name. I also have evidence that a significant portion of this money was used to purchase a boat. This is fraud. I am giving Reese 24 hours to return the entirety of the donated funds before I report this to the police and to GoFundMe. I attached a single screenshot, the GoFundMe total. Then I put my phone down and waited. The response was almost immediate, but not from Reese. My mother was the first to reply. Sierra, this is not the way to handle things. You're threatening your own sister. This is a family matter, and it should be handled with love and forgiveness. My father added a simple, pleading, "Please don't do this." I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. Their reaction was exactly what I expected. Protect the peace, ignore the crime. A few minutes later, a private message from Sarah popped up. My heart lifted for a second, thinking she, the oldest, the most sensible, would be my ally. Her message extinguished that hope instantly. I wish you'd just handle this privately, Sierra. You're going to tear this family apart over some money. Family doesn't go to war. Can't you just talk to her? I tried. I typed back, my fingers stiff. She hung up on me. Sarah's reply was the final nail in the coffin. Well, try again. Making a big public scene is just going to humiliate everyone. Think about Mom and Dad. She wasn't thinking about the theft, the lies, the hundreds of people who were scammed. She was thinking about appearances, about the inconvenience of a messy family drama. Her neutrality was just a convenient form of complicity. I closed the chat, my decision solidified. They had made their choice. Now, I would make mine. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a notification. Reese had updated her Instagram story. I clicked on it, my stomach tightening. It was a short video of her on the boat, wind whipping through her hair as she steered it across the lake. The text overlay was a direct shot at me. Boating into peace and haters, can drown. Then I noticed I could no longer see her main feed. I searched for her profile. Nothing. She had blocked me. She had blocked me on Facebook too. It was a coward's move, a child's attempt to make the problem disappear by closing her eyes. The last thread of my restraint snapped. She wasn't just unrepentant. She was gloating. My mind went back to the news article, the one that had fabricated my quote and painted Reese as a hero. I found the journalist's name again. Elena Grant. A quick search showed she was an investigative reporter for the site, specializing in human interest stories that often had a darker side. She had a professional email listed in her bio. My hands moved with a life of their own. I composed a new email, my tone as cold and factual as the one I'd sent to my family. Subject: follow-up to your story on the Wolf family. GoFundMe. Dear Ms. Grant, you recently wrote an article titled Heroic Daughters Viral Campaign, a Beacon of Hope for Local Family. My name is Sierra Wolf. I am the sister mentioned in the piece. I am writing to inform you that the story you were told is a fabrication. The GoFundMe campaign was created without my knowledge or consent. The quotes attributed to me are false. I have never spoken to you or any other journalist. The campaign creator, my sister Reese Wolf, has misappropriated over $70,000 in donations for personal use, including the purchase of a new boat. I was the one who paid my father's medical bills, using my entire life savings of $50,000. My sister used my sacrifice as the basis for her fraudulent campaign. I have attached documentation to support these claims, including bank statements, screenshots of the campaign, social media posts, and a timeline of events. I have already reported this to the appropriate authorities. Your article made her fraud possible. I believe your readers and the donors she deceived deserve to know the truth. Sincerely, Sierra Wolf. I attached a zip file containing every piece of evidence I had collected. My finger hovered over the send button for only a second before I clicked it. A wave of something terrifying and liberating washed over me. There was no going back now. I didn't expect to hear back for days, if at all. But the next morning, as I was getting ready for my shift at the coffee shop, my phone buzzed with a new email. It was from Elena Grant. Her reply was one sentence, and it made my heart pound against my ribs. I want to run this story publicly. Are you ready to detonate your sister's life? I stared at Eleanor's email, the word detonate echoing in my mind. Was I ready? A week ago, the thought of publicly shaming my family would have been horrifying, but after their dismissals, their complicity, and Reese's smug defiance, the question felt less like a moral dilemma and more like a tactical choice. They had left me no other path. I typed back a single word. Yes. Elena called me within the hour. Her voice was sharp, professional, and completely unsentimental. She asked pointed questions, verifying every detail in my email. She wanted to see the wire transfer confirmation for the $50,000 I'd sent my parents. She wanted the exact dates of Reese's boat pictures. She was a journalist, not a crusader, and she was building an airtight case. I spent the next 2 hours on the phone with her, walking her through my evidence. This is more than enough, she said finally, a note of grim satisfaction in her voice. I'm writing this up. It will likely go live tomorrow morning. I'll need a direct quote from you. Something on the record. I thought for a moment. Just say this, I said, my voice steady. The truth is not a family secret. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm, my stomach in knots. I made coffee, my hands shaking slightly, and opened my laptop. The article was already the top story on the news site. The headline was brutal. The sister who stole a sacrifice. GoFundMe hero unmasked as fraudster by her own family. Elena had used everything. She embedded my screenshots next to Reese's Instagram posts. She showed the timeline of the GoFundMe's creation versus my bank transfer. She contrasted Reese's heroic daughter narrative with the cold, hard facts of the boat purchase. My quote was the final, devastating blow. The article was a meticulous journalistic takedown, and it was spreading like wildfire. My phone started buzzing and didn't stop. Friends, old classmates, even distant relatives were texting, all with the same shocked messages. Is this true? Sierra, I'm so sorry. I can't believe Reese would do that. I ignored them all and went to the GoFundMe page. It was chaos. The comment section was exploding with furious messages from donors. I want my money back. I donated $500 to help a sick man, not buy a party boat. This is disgusting. I've reported this campaign for fraud. What a horrible person. Using her sister's kindness like that. A red banner had appeared at the top of the page. This campaign is under review. Donations have been suspended pending an investigation by our trust and safety team. The money was frozen. It was the first real consequence, and a wave of relief washed over me. But as I watched the online outrage grow, I felt a new sense of responsibility. These people had donated with good intentions. They had wanted to help a family in crisis. Their money had been stolen, but their generosity was real. I couldn't just let that goodwill curdle into cynicism. I opened a new GoFundMe page. This time, the title was different, turning a betrayal into a blessing. In the description, I told the full, unvarnished truth. I explained what my sister had done and acknowledged the anger and disappointment of the donors. Many of you gave money to help my father, I wrote. That money was stolen. But your intention to do good shouldn't be stolen along with it. I cannot in good conscience keep any funds associated with this deception. Therefore, this new, verified fundraiser has been created with a different purpose. 100% of the funds raised here will be donated directly to another local family facing a medical crisis. I had spent the previous night researching. I found a story in the local paper about a family, the Johnsons, whose young son was battling leukemia. Their insurance wasn't covering the experimental treatments, and they were on the verge of losing their home. I posted a link to their story and named them as the sole beneficiaries of the new campaign. Let's give the help where it was truly intended, I concluded. Let's show that compassion is stronger than greed. I posted the link on my own social media, my first post in months. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The story of the fraud had primed the pump. Now, people had a way to channel their outrage into positive action. Donations started pouring in, far faster than they had for Reese's campaign. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. It was my mother. She was sobbing. "Sierra, how could you?" she wailed. "The things people are saying. Reese's life is ruined. You've destroyed your sister." "Reese destroyed herself," I said calmly. You all had a chance to fix this privately. You chose not to. This isn't fixing it. This is revenge. This is consequences, I replied, and hung up the phone. Later that evening, a link started circulating on social media. It was a live stream, shot on a shaky cell phone. The video showed a marina at sunset. In the center of the frame was Reese's boat, the one she'd been so proud of. She was standing on the dock, screaming at two police officers who were standing calmly beside the boat, which now had a large seized notice slapped on its side. Tyrese was in the background, his head in his hands. "You can't just take it!" Reese shrieked, her voice shrill with panic. "We paid for it!" One of the officers looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am, it was purchased with funds currently under investigation for felony fraud. It's evidence." The video of Reese's dockside meltdown went viral in our local community. Someone had cross-posted it with a link to Elena's article, and the narrative was set in stone, the entitled fraudster getting her comeuppance. I watched it once, a cold knot of something that wasn't quite satisfaction tightening in my chest. Then I closed the tab. I had started the fire, but I had no desire to dance in the flames. I maintained my public silence, letting the story run its course. The legal process, however, was just getting started. GoFundMe's fraud team contacted me, confirming they were working with law enforcement. Dozens of donors had filed individual reports, creating a mountain of complaints against Reese. A few days later, I learned from a brief notice in the local paper's police blotter that she had been formally charged with wire fraud. Life settled into a strange new rhythm. I worked my shifts at the coffee shop, came home to my quiet apartment, and watched the donation total for the Johnson family climb. I was an outcast from my own family, but I had never felt less alone. Messages of support poured in from strangers, many of whom shared their own stories of financial hardship and familial betrayal. About a week after the article dropped, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. She looked haggard, her face etched with worry. "She's a mess, Sierra," she said, her voice trembling as she stood in my doorway. I didn't invite her in. "She can't eat, she can't sleep, she could go to jail. You have to call them, the police. Tell them it was all a misunderstanding." I looked at her, at the familiar, desperate plea for me to smooth things over, to absorb the damage and restore the family's fragile peace. For the first time, I felt nothing but a profound sense of exhaustion. "It wasn't a misunderstanding, Mom. It was a crime. We all make mistakes," she insisted, tears welling in her eyes. "She's still your sister. Family is supposed to be there for each other, no matter what." "I was there for you," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I gave you everything I had, no questions asked. And in return, you enabled her to steal from strangers in my name. Reese made her choice. She can call you when she gets out." I closed the door gently in her face. The finality of the click echoed in the hallway. A few days later, my father called. His voice was weak, laced with a weary disappointment I knew was directed at me. He didn't mention Reese or the article. He talked about a supplemental insurance bill that had come in, one that wasn't covered. It was only a few $100s, but his tone was heavy with implication. "I just don't know how we're going to manage this one, Sierra Bear." He sighed. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting. He was testing me, seeing if the old guilt and sense of duty still worked. I thought about the new consulting job I'd just accepted, a remote position in public health policy that would finally get me out of the coffee shop and back on a career path. I thought about the future I was slowly, painstakingly rebuilding for myself. "I'm sorry to hear that, Dad," I said, my voice even. "That sounds stressful." I offered no solution, no money, no rescue. The silence on his end of the line was thick with unspoken accusation before he mumbled a goodbye and hung up. That evening, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was one of the donors from the original GoFundMe. His name was Andy Gonzalez, a young guy, maybe a few years younger than me, who had donated $1,000 to Reese's campaign. He had been one of the most vocal advocates for reporting the fraud. "Hey, I just wanted to thank you," he said, "for what you did with the new fundraiser. It takes a lot of guts to do what you did." "It was the right thing to do," I said. "Yeah, well, not everyone does the right thing," he said with a dry laugh. "Listen, the reason I'm calling, I've been in touch with a few other people who donated, and we've been talking to the fraud investigator at GoFundMe. He gave me a little tip I thought you should know." He paused, and I leaned forward, intrigued. "They're looking at where the money went. Specifically, they're looking at Tyrese's involvement." My blood went cold. "Her boyfriend?" "Exactly. The investigator said that if Reese transferred any of the fraudulent funds to him, or if they co-mingled the money in a joint account that he had access to, he could be considered an accessory. If he knowingly benefited from the proceeds of a crime, well, that's a whole other set of charges." I thought of the boat, of him popping champagne in the video, of his own social media posts bragging about their new toy. He wasn't just a bystander, he was a participant. "It might get a lot worse for your sister," Andy said, his voice grim. "And for him." Months passed. The media storm died down, replaced by the slow, grinding gears of the justice system. As Andy predicted, Tyrese was charged as well. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of a felony trial, Reese and Tyrese both took plea deals. Reese was convicted of wire fraud, sentenced to 2 years of probation, significant community service, and ordered to pay full restitution to GoFundMe. Tyrese got a lesser charge, probation, and was held jointly responsible for the restitution. The boat was long gone, sold at a police auction. I spent those months rebuilding. I started my consulting job, moved into a slightly bigger apartment, and poured my energy into my work. I kept in touch with Cameron, our old friendship rekindling over texts and occasional coffees. He was a grounding force, a reminder that not everyone in my life was a transaction. Then came the invitation. A stilted text from my mother. "Thanksgiving dinner is at 2 p.m. We hope you'll come." My first instinct was to ignore it. The thought of sitting in that house, surrounded by the ghosts of their choices, was nauseating, but Cameron, ever the strategist, advised me to go. "It's better to show up on your own terms," he'd said. "Don't give them the chance to paint you as the bitter one who abandoned the family. Go. Be polite. Be untouchable. And it doesn't hurt to be physically present in the state in case they try any legal nonsense." So, on Thanksgiving Day, for the first time since the scandal broke, I drove to my parents' house. I walked in without knocking, my purse clutched in my hand like a shield. A hush fell over the living room. My mother, my father, and Sarah were all there, their conversations dying mid-sentence. They stared at me as if I were an apparition. "Hello?" I said, my voice cool and even. My mother rushed forward, her hands fluttering nervously. "Sierra, we're so glad you came." Her hug was brief and awkward. My dad just nodded at me from his recliner, his eyes not quite meeting mine. Sarah offered a tight, forced smile. Reese was not there. We moved to the dining room, the air thick with unspoken words. The table was set with the good china, a perfect picture of familial harmony. But there was an empty chair, a gaping hole where Reese would have sat. No one mentioned her name. The conversation was painfully stilted, a minefield of safe topics. The weather, a neighbour's new car, the quality of this year's turkey. I ate quietly, answering direct questions with polite, brief responses. I was a visitor from another country, observing their strange customs. The passive-aggressive performance of normalcy was suffocating. Finally, as my mother was clearing the plates, my father turned to me. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, designed to sound like a private, heartfelt plea. "That supplemental bill came up again, Sierra Bear," he said, his eyes full of practiced sorrow. "It's just one bill. I was wondering if you could see your way to helping your old dad out." The table went silent. My mother froze in the doorway to the kitchen. Sarah stared down at her plate. This was it. The test. They were trying to pull me back into my old role, the family fixer, the one who paid for their peace of mind. I met my father's gaze directly. A slow, soft smile spread across my face. It didn't reach my eyes. "Why don't you ask your favourite this time?" I asked, my voice just as quiet as his. The colour drained from his face. My mother let out a small, wounded gasp. Sarah finally looked up, her expression a mixture of shock and something that looked suspiciously like fear. I had not only refused, I had thrown their hypocrisy back in their faces. I had named the empty chair. The rest of the dinner was a blur of icy silence. I left as soon as I could, offering a generic "thanks for dinner" to the room at large. As I was walking to my car, Sarah hurried out after me. "Sierra, wait," she said, her voice low and urgent. I turned, waiting. I expected an apology, an explanation, anything. Instead, she looked at me with a kind of resentful panic. "I just thought you should know," she said, refusing to meet my eyes. "Reese is talking to a lawyer. She's planning to sue you." I blinked, genuinely surprised. "For what?" "Emotional damages and cyberbullying," Sarah said, as if reciting from a script. "She says you orchestrated a public hate campaign that ruined her life." I almost laughed. It was so perfectly Reese. No accountability, no remorse, just a pivot to being the victim. My sister, the architect of her own destruction, was now trying to bill me for the demolition. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to Cameron, relaying what Sarah had just told me. His reply came back in less than a minute. It was short, and it was all the reassurance I needed. Let her try. Back in my apartment, the sterile quiet felt like a sanctuary after the suffocating atmosphere of my parents' home. I flicked through old photos on my laptop, images from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. There I was, at my college graduation, arm in arm with Reese, both of us beaming. Another of my dad teaching me how to change a tire, his hands greasy, my face smudged with dirt. They were relics of a trust that no longer existed, artifacts from a buried civilization. I didn't delete them. I just closed the folder. Reese's lawsuit, as Cameron predicted, was a pathetic fizzle. No lawyer would take a case that was, in essence, a complaint about suffering the consequences of one's own felony. It was a final, desperate grasp for a victim narrative that no one was buying. The threat vanished into the same void where my family's apologies should have been. My fundraiser for the Johnson family had been a staggering success. It closed out a few weeks after Thanksgiving at just over $95,000. I met with them once at a coffee shop to formally transfer the beneficiary credentials. They were a kind, exhausted couple who cried when they explained what the money meant. It wasn't just about paying for their son's treatment. It was about getting their house back from the brink of foreclosure. It was stability. It was hope. Seeing their relief was the only clean, uncomplicated good to come out of the entire mess. The experience had ignited something in me. The methodical way I'd gathered evidence, the cold logic Cameron had used to guide me, the power of a well-constructed legal argument, it all clicked into place. My graduate work in public health had been about helping systems work better for people. This was the other side of the coin, protecting people when systems fail them. The consulting job was good, but it wasn't the right fight. I spent my evenings studying for the LSAT. My application essays wrote themselves. I told the story of a fraudulent charity and the legal framework that brought it to light. I wrote about the intersection of public trust and the law. I got into a great law school, set to start in the fall. I would never again be caught off guard, and I would make damn sure I had the tools to help others who were. I never got my $50,000 back. Reese was on a restitution plan, paying a pittance to GoFundMe every month that would take her the better part of a decade to complete. The money was gone. So was my PhD candidacy, my sense of familial security, and any lingering childish belief that love was unconditional. But revenge, I learned, isn't about restoration. You can't get back what was broken. It didn't heal the wound of the betrayal, or erase the years of loyalty I had so willingly given. It didn't make me happy. What it did was give me something else. It cleared the board. It cauterized the wound. It gave me the power to draw a final, permanent line between my past and my future. My family had built their comfort on my silent sacrifice for years. When I finally refused to be their foundation, the whole rotten structure collapsed. I didn't mourn its loss. I was just glad to be out from under the rubble. Sometimes I think about them. My parents, living in their quiet house, forever disappointed that I wouldn't be the bigger person and absorb the fallout. Sarah, trapped in her self-imposed neutrality, forever trying to smooth over cracks that have become canyons. And Reese, paying for her crime in small, humiliating increments, forever blaming me for holding up the mirror. They are a family of ghosts, haunting a house I will never visit again. The boat, the lies, the fake tears, those all sunk like anchors. But me, I'm still floating.
The summons came via text from my mother. Family meeting, 7 p.m., upstairs. In my family, family meeting is code for an ambush. It's never about celebrating good news. It's about cornering one person until they break. For the last decade, that person has usually been me. My name is Nicole. I'm 29, and for the past 7 years, I've lived in the basement of my parents' house. It's not as pathetic as it sounds. It's a fully finished apartment with its own entrance, a small kitchen, and a bathroom that doesn't have my dad's beard trimmings all over the sink. It's quiet, it's stable, and it allowed me to build a life for myself without anyone looking over my shoulder. Or so I thought. I trudged upstairs at 7:02 p.m., deliberately 2 minutes late. They were all there, arranged on the living room furniture like a jury. My mom, Linda, sat ramrod straight on the floral sofa. My dad, Harvey, was sunk into his recliner, his eyes fixed on the blank TV screen. And on the love seat, holding hands like they were posing for a wedding announcement, were my brother Dale and his new wife, Angelina. "Nicole, you're late," my mom said, her voice tight. She's 59, but carries herself with the rigid certainty of a woman who has never once been wrong. "Sorry, work call," I lied, taking the only empty seat, an uncomfortable wooden dining chair they dragged in for me. My brother Dale, 32, and glowing with the unearned confidence of a man who's never faced a real consequence, gave me a patronizing smile. "No worries, Nikki. This won't take long." Beside him, Angelina, a pristine 28-year-old who looked like she was assembled from an Instagram filter, gave a little wave. Her diamond ring caught the light and flashed aggressively. "We have some really exciting news," she chirped. I waited. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. My dad cleared his throat but said nothing. He's 63 and has spent the last 40 years perfecting the art of being a passive observer in his own life. Finally, my mom folded her hands in her lap. Dale and Angelina are ready to start their life together properly. They need a space to save up for their own house, and since this is the family home... She trailed off, looking at me expectantly. I just stared back. "Okay, and?" Dale leaned forward, his smile widening. "And we need the basement, Nick. It's the perfect starter space for us." The air left my lungs in a silent rush. I looked from Dale's smug face to Angelina's perfectly neutral mask, then to my mother's hard, determined expression. I glanced at my dad, who was now intently studying a loose thread on the arm of his chair. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "You want me to move out?" I asked, my voice flat. "It's time you stood on your own 2 feet, honey," my mom said, delivering the line she'd clearly been rehearsing. "You're 29. This will be a good push for you." "A push?" They were calling it a push, Angelina chimed in, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "We know it's sudden, but we just can't afford a place of our own right now, not with the wedding expenses. We'd be so grateful." I felt a cold, dark rage begin to uncoil in my stomach. It was an old, familiar feeling, but this time it was different, sharper. I could feel it honing itself into a fine point. For years, I had swallowed the little injustices, the casual dismissals, the constant reminders that Dale was the sun and I was just a planet caught in his orbit. But this was no small thing. This was my home. "How long do I have?" I asked, keeping my tone even. Dale glanced at Angelina, then back at me. "Well, our lease is up at the end of the month, so... a week?" "That should be enough time to pack up your things, right?" "A week? 7 days to dismantle 7 years of my life so the golden child and his bride could play house." I looked at each of them, one by one. I saw the entitlement in Dale's eyes, the condescending pity in Angelina's, the righteous justification in my mother's, and the gutless shame in my father's. They all expected me to cry, to argue, to throw a tantrum. They were prepared for a fight. So I gave them nothing. I stood up from the hard wooden chair. "Okay," I said. The room went quiet. They were stunned by my easy compliance. Dale's smirk faltered for a second. "Okay," my mom repeated, suspicious. "Yes. Okay. I'll be out in a week." I turned and walked out of the living room, down the stairs, and into my basement apartment. I closed the door behind me, leaned against it, and let out a single, silent breath. The rage wasn't hot anymore. It was ice cold and perfectly clear. They thought they were pushing me out. They thought I was a charity case, living off their generosity. They had no idea that the $1,800 a month I transferred to my father's bank account wasn't rent. It was 80% of their mortgage payment, plus utilities. They had no idea I'd been planning my exit for the last 2 years, just waiting for the right moment. And they just handed it to me on a silver platter. The first 24 hours were a blur of cold, methodical fury. I didn't sleep. Instead, I started packing, but not in the frantic, tear-stained way they probably imagined. Every box I taped up was a small act of rebellion. My family has always operated on a system of plausible deniability. They chip away at you with 1,000 tiny cuts, then act shocked when you bled. I remembered being 16 and saving up for months for a new laptop for school. The day I bought it, Dale's ancient one mysteriously died, and my mom suggested I let him use mine just for a little while so his grades wouldn't suffer. He returned it 6 months later with a cracked screen and a sticky keyboard. When I got upset, I was the selfish one. "It's just a thing, Nicole," my mom had sighed. Family is more important. That was their mantra. Family is more important. It was the excuse they used to justify every imbalance, every time I was expected to shrink so Dale could shine. As I sorted through my desk, I didn't just pack, I documented. I found the receipt for the water heater I'd paid to replace 2 years ago when theirs burst and flooded my bathroom. They'd promised to pay me back. They never did. I took a photo of the receipt and uploaded it to a secure cloud folder. I did the same with the invoice for the new circuit breaker panel I'd covered last winter, and the property tax bill from the year my dad was laid off, which I'd paid in full. My rent was just the beginning. I was their emergency fund, their safety net, and they didn't even have the decency to see it. Upstairs, I could hear them. My mother's high, tinkling laugh, Angelina's performative giggles. They were probably celebrating their victory, toasting to the brilliant plan that finally got the freeloader out of the basement. The sound didn't hurt me anymore. It was just noise, fuel. By noon the next day, I had 3 neat stacks of boxes and a digital folder overflowing with evidence. I took a break, sat on my packed-up sofa, and pulled out my phone. I scrolled past my mom's text. "Hope the packing is going well. Let me know if you need boxes." And dialed Madison. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, you've been quiet. Everything okay?" Madison is my best friend. Has been since we were kids building forts in the woods behind this very house. She's the only one who knows the full, unedited version of my family. She's also a shark of a real estate agent. "I need a favor," I said, my voice steady. "A big one. And it needs to happen fast. I live for big, fast favors." "What's up?" "My family is kicking me out. They gave me a week." There was a pause, then a low curse. "Are you kidding me? After everything you know what? Never mind. I'm not surprised. What do you need?" "I need you to help me buy a house," I said. "Okay, we can do that. I can start sending you listings right—" "No," I interrupted. "I know which house I want to buy. This one." The silence on the other end of the line was profound. Then a slow, wicked laugh started to build. "Oh, Nicole, you're my absolute favorite person. Tell me everything." An hour later, the wheels were in motion. Madison was drawing up the paperwork. The next call was harder. I had to pull the trigger on a plan I'd only ever seen as a distant fantasy. I dialed the direct line for my financial advisor, Martin Phillips. His assistant answered, but when I gave my name, she put me straight through. "Nicole, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Martin's voice was warm and familiar. He's a sharp, no-nonsense man of 42 who started managing my meager savings when I was 19 and landed my first real job. He never treated me like a kid, and he never questioned why I was so determined to build a firewall between my money and my family. "Hi, Martin. I have a situation. I need to liquidate some assets and move a significant amount of capital. as in, by the end of the week. He didn't even hesitate. All right, how much are we talking? And is everything okay? Everything is about to be, I said. Can I come in this afternoon? My 2 o'clock just canceled. The office is yours. When I walked into his sleek downtown office a few hours later, he greeted me with a handshake and a kind smile. He led me back to his conference room, a file already laid out on the polished table. I ran the numbers after you called, he said, tapping a page. Your portfolio is performing 17% above projections. Your credit score is immaculate. Whatever you're planning, Nicole, you're in a very strong position to do it. He looked at me over the rim of his glasses. You've been smart, patient. I'm proud of you. Hearing those words from him, a practical stranger compared to my family, almost broke me. But I held it together. This wasn't the time to fall apart. This was the time to build. That night, after 3 days of relentless packing, I couldn't sleep. The basement felt foreign, filled with the ghosts of boxes and empty shelves. Around 2 a.m., I crept upstairs. The house was dark and silent, breathing around me. I walked through the living room, my fingers tracing the back of the plush sofa. I'd paid for it. It was a housewarming gift to my parents 5 years ago, a replacement for the lumpy, torn one they'd had since the 90s. At the time, my mom had gushed, "Oh, Nicole, you shouldn't have." Now, I'm sure she saw it as just another piece of her furniture. I moved into the dining room, the solid oak table and chairs, a Christmas present from me after Dale had drunkenly broken one of the old chairs during a holiday party, the new smart TV in my dad's recliner zone, my birthday gift to him last year. I had slowly, quietly upgraded their lives, piece by piece, while they told their friends I was the struggling artist type who just couldn't seem to get it together. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. The next afternoon, I met Madison at a coffee shop halfway between my house and her office. She slid a thick folder across the table, her expression a perfect blend of professional calm and personal glee. "Here it is," she said, "the purchase agreement. I incorporated the LLC for you this morning, Benson Properties. A little on the nose, but I figured you'd appreciate it." I smiled. The first genuine one in days. I love it. The offer is all cash, well over asking, with a 7-day close and no contingencies. In this market, no seller in their right mind would refuse it, especially not a seller who is financially over-leveraged and has no idea it's coming. She had pulled their mortgage information. They'd refinanced twice, and their interest rate was ugly. They were more vulnerable than I ever realized. I took a deep breath and signed the documents, my hands surprisingly steady. The largest financial transaction of my life, and it felt as natural as breathing. I was taking back what was mine. I was sealing the envelope when my phone buzzed. A text from Dale. "Angie and I are swinging by in a bit to take some measurements. Hope that's cool." It wasn't a question. It was a notification. An hour later, they let themselves in, not even bothering to knock on my basement door. Angelina waltzed in with a tape measure and a binder full of paint swatches. "Don't mind us," she sang, already measuring the wall where my bed used to be. "I'm thinking a nice calming sage green for this wall. It'll be our little sanctuary." Dale stood in the middle of the room, arms crossed, a proprietary look on his face. "We're thinking of ripping out this carpet, too. Putting in some of that nice vinyl plank. It'll really open the place up." I just leaned against a stack of boxes, sipping a bottle of water, and watched them redesign my home right in front of me. I offered nothing. No small talk, no resistance. My silence seemed to unnerve them more than an argument would have. "So, found a place yet?" Dale asked, trying to sound casual. "Looking at a few options," I said vaguely. Angelina paused her measuring. "You should try the apartments over on Mill Street. They're cozy." Probably right in your price range. The unspoken insult hung in the air. Cheap, small, and pathetic. Just like me. Thanks for the tip, I said, my voice a flat line. I'll check them out. As they were leaving, my dad appeared at the top of the stairs. He'd heard the commotion. He watched Dale and Angelina walk past him. Then his eyes met mine. For a split second, I saw it again. A flicker of something that looked an awful lot like guilt. He knew on some level that this was wrong, but he said nothing. He just turned and disappeared back into the kitchen. That flicker was all I would ever get from him, and it was nowhere near enough. Later that evening, I went upstairs to use the main printer. I needed hard copies of all my documents. The house was empty. My parents were out at their weekly bridge game. As I waited for the pages to print, I noticed the filing cabinet in the corner of the office was slightly ajar. Curiosity got the better of me. I knew my mom kept everything, meticulously organized. I pulled open the top drawer, labeled Finances. Inside there were folders for mortgage, utilities, taxes. And then I saw it. Tucked in the back, a thick, worn manila folder with a single word written on the tab in my mother's neat cursive, Dale. My heart started to pound. I hesitated for only a moment before pulling it out. I opened the flap, and my breath caught in my throat. It was stuffed with statements, bank statements, credit card bills, student loan notices, all of them years old, all of them paid in full. A slow, cold smirk spread across my face. This was better than I could have ever imagined. I took the folder down to my basement, my hands shaking slightly. Under the harsh fluorescent light of my half-dismantled kitchen, I spread the contents across the floor. It was a decade of my brother's financial irresponsibility, meticulously documented and paid for by my parents. There were student loan statements from the private university he'd attended, the one I was told we couldn't afford. Monthly payments of over $600, made from my parents' joint checking account for 8 straight years. There were credit card bills littered with charges for expensive dinners, weekend trips, and designer clothes, all racking up interest until a check from Linda and Harvey Benson swooped in to clear the balance. They had even paid for his honeymoon to Hawaii, a $5,000 charge on their visa from 3 months ago. I felt a hollow ache in my chest. While I was carefully budgeting every dollar, paying my rent on time, and secretly covering their asses when they fell short, they were bankrolling his entire adult life. The narrative they'd spun for me, that I needed to be responsible, to pull my own weight, to stand on my own 2 feet, was a complete and utter lie. It was a story crafted for an audience of one. Me. Dale was never expected to stand on his own feet. He was carried on their shoulders. My anger wasn't hot and explosive anymore. It had cooled into something dense and heavy, like a block of steel in my gut. I spent the next 2 hours scanning every single page into my laptop, creating a digital archive of their hypocrisy. The receipts didn't lie. The numbers told a story far more damning than any accusation I could ever make. When I was done, I slipped the original documents back into the folder and returned it to the filing cabinet, leaving no trace of my discovery. For the next 2 days, I leaned into the role they'd cast for me. I played the part of the panicked, desperate daughter. I let my mother overhear me on the phone with a fictitious landlord, begging for a break on a security deposit. "I'm sorry, I just don't have it all right now," I'd said, my voice cracking with fake desperation. "Can I pay it in installments?" From the corner of my eye, I saw her listening from the hallway, a smug, satisfied look on her face. This was what she wanted, proof that I couldn't make it without them, that their push was a necessary act of tough love. I let Dale see me scrolling through listings for dingy, overpriced studio apartments. Tough market out there, huh? He'd said, peering over my shoulder at a picture of a kitchen with brown linoleum and a rust-stained sink. Guess you should have saved up more. Guess so, I'd mumbled, playing defeated. Inside, I was a coiled spring. Every condescending comment, every pitying glance, was just another turn of the screw. They had no idea they were arming me. On Friday, with just 2 days left before my eviction, I got a message that threw me for a loop. It was a DM on Instagram from a name I vaguely recognized, Cameron Warner. His profile picture showed a handsome guy with a friendly smile, standing on a boat. The message was short and to the point. Hey, this is kind of random, but I think we have a mutual acquaintance. Angelina Taylor. I'm her ex. I saw on her profile that she married your brother. If you have a minute, I think there are some things you should know. My first instinct was to ignore it. What could some random ex-boyfriend possibly have to say that would matter? But my curiosity, now honed to a razor's edge, wouldn't let it go. Angelina was a little too perfect, her story a little too polished. There had to be a crack in the facade somewhere. I typed back a simple reply. I can meet for coffee tomorrow morning. He responded almost immediately with the name of a cafe downtown. This felt different, messier. The financial documents were clean, undeniable proof. Whatever this was, it felt like wading into drama I didn't need. But my family had made this personal. They had reduced my life to a logistical problem to be solved for their own convenience. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. And that meant knowing all the players on the board and all the secrets they were hiding. The coffee shop was one of those aggressively trendy places with exposed brick and Edison bulbs. Cameron Warner was already there, sitting at a small table in the back. He was 26, younger than Angelina, and had a restless energy about him. He looked less like a man out for revenge and more like someone genuinely bewildered by how things had turned out. Thanks for meeting me, he said as I sat down. I know this is weird. It is, I agreed. So, what is it I should know? He took a nervous sip of his coffee. Look, Angie, she's a planner. She always has a goal, and she does whatever it takes to get there. We were together for 3 years. We were talking about getting married. He pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. The screen showed a photo of him and Angelina, smiling on a beach. The date stamp was from late April. She'd gotten engaged to my brother in early June. We broke up 2 weeks before she announced her engagement to Dale, he continued, his voice tight with a hurt that was still fresh. She told me she needed to find herself. Turns out, she'd already found my replacement. That was slimy, but not exactly a bombshell. Social climbers climb. It's what they do. I must have looked unimpressed because he leaned in closer. That's not the real reason I called you, he said, lowering his voice. About a year ago, Angie got really into crypto. She convinced me to put some money in, and I did okay. Then she started talking about this family business she wanted to start, a boutique marketing firm. She needed seed money. She convinced Dale to sell off a big chunk of his crypto portfolio. I think it was around $30,000 to fund it. I raised an eyebrow. I've never heard of any family business. Cameron let out a bitter laugh. That's because it never existed. The day after the money hit her personal account, the business was dead. She told Dale the market was too volatile and that they should just use the money for their future, for their wedding. She basically tricked him into paying for his own engagement ring. Now that was interesting. It was a level of cold, calculated manipulation that even my brother didn't deserve. Do you have any proof of this? I asked. He nodded, scrolling through his phone again. He showed me screenshots of texts between him and Angelina where she'd bragged about her plan. He's so trusting. It's almost cute. One of her messages read, "This wedding is going to be epic. She's a shark, Cameron said, finally looking up at me. And your brother is swimming in her tank. I just figured you had a right to know what kind of person was joining your family. I pulled out my own phone. Can you send me those? He hesitated for a second, then nodded. Yeah. Okay. As the images loaded on my screen, I hit the record button on my voice memo app, which I'd opened before I sat down. Just for my own clarity, I said calmly, can you state your name and confirm that you're sending me these screenshots of your own free will? He looked a little startled, but complied. I now had a recorded statement and dated evidence. Fallout insurance. I had no intention of using it, not yet. But I learned my lesson about coming to a fight unarmed. That afternoon, my mother insisted on taking me to lunch, a transparent attempt to manage her guilt. We sat at a sterile chain restaurant, the kind she loves. So, she said, stirring her iced tea, have you found a place? Your father and I are worried about you. I think so, I lied smoothly. It's a studio over on Mill Street. The landlord seems a little sketchy, and the plumbing makes a weird noise, but it's what I can afford. I let my shoulders slump, putting on my best impression of a beaten dog. She didn't offer help. She didn't offer sympathy. She just nodded, a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. Well, a little struggle is good for character development. It'll be good for you. The waitress brought our salads. As I picked at my lettuce, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Dale. A picture of a plush, silver gray carpet sample. The caption read, "New carpet for the basement. What do you think? Getting it installed the day after you move out." I looked from the picture of the expensive carpet to my mother's self-satisfied face. They were literally planning to recarpet the ground I was being kicked out of before my footprints were even cold. I typed back a one-word reply, nice. When I got home, there was a package tucked behind the bushes near my basement door. It was from Madison. I opened it in my car. Inside was a heavy-duty plastic stake and a sign neatly wrapped in plastic. It was a standard real estate sign, red and white and bold. In huge letters, it read, "Sold, moving day, the final day, the 1-week deadline." I was up before the sun. I'd hired a small moving crew, 2 guys and a truck, and they arrived at 6 a.m. sharp. They were efficient and professional, clearing out my entire basement apartment in under 2 hours. Every box, every piece of furniture, every trace of the life I had built within those 4 walls was loaded onto the truck. I didn't tell them where I was going, just that my things were going into a storage unit for now. It was a cleaner lie. By 8:30 a.m., the truck was gone and the basement was empty. Eerily so. It was just a space now, stripped of any personality. It looked bigger and sadder than I remembered. I did a final sweep, picking up a stray rubber band and a dust bunny from under the radiator. Then I walked out, locking the door behind me for the last time. I spent the next hour at a nearby park, sipping a coffee and watching the clock. Madison texted me at 9:45. "It's done. The sale officially recorded with the county 10 minutes ago. Congratulations, homeowner." A wave of something, relief, terror, vindication, washed over me. It was real. I owned it. At 10:15, I drove back and parked down the street, waiting. I saw Dale's car pull into the driveway right at 10:30, followed closely by my parents' sedan. Dale and Angelina got out, beaming, and started unloading boxes from their trunk. My parents got out to supervise, my mother already directing traffic. No, put that one by the door, Dale. That has the kitchen things." This was my cue. I got out of my car, walked to the trunk, and pulled out the sign Madison had given me. It was heavier than it looked. I walked calmly up the driveway, past my family who were too busy arranging boxes to notice me at first. I found a soft patch of grass on the front lawn, right next to the prize-winning rose bushes my mother was so proud of. I positioned the stake, lifted my foot, and drove it deep into the earth with a satisfying thump. The sold sign stood tall and defiant. It took them a moment. Dale was the first to see it. He stopped, a box labeled bathroom halfway to the ground. "What the hell is that?" he asked, pointing. My mother and Angelina turned. My dad, who had been quietly observing from the porch, went still. They all stared at the sign as if it were a venomous snake that had just appeared on their lawn. "What is going on, Nicole?" my mother demanded, her voice sharp with confusion and annoyance. Right on schedule, Madison's sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. She got out, dressed in a sharp blazer and heels, radiating professional authority. She walked right up to me, a huge smile on her face, and ignored everyone else completely. "Nicole, congratulations," she said, her voice loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. She pulled a set of keys from her pocket, the keys to the front door, the back door, the garage, and pressed them into my hand. "It's all yours. Welcome home." The silence that followed was absolute. My family stood frozen, a tableau of disbelief. Dale's mouth was hanging open. Angelina's perfectly applied lipstick was stretched into a thin, ugly line. My mother's face was a storm cloud of warring emotions. "Yours?" Dale finally sputtered, looking from me to the sign and back again. "What does she mean, it's yours?" I turned to face them, the keys feeling solid and real in my palm. The rage I'd been holding on to all week was gone, replaced by a profound, chilling calm. "It means I bought the house," I said, my voice even. "The sale closed this morning." My mother took a step forward. "That's not possible. You can't. We would never sell it to you." "You didn't sell it to me," I corrected her gently. "You sold it to a private real estate investment company called Benson Properties, LLC, an all-cash offer, 20% over asking. I believe you and Dad signed the papers on Thursday." My dad sank onto the porch steps, his face pale. He knew. He had signed, and he hadn't said a word. Dale just shook his head, laughing a humorless, broken sound. "This is a joke. This has to be a joke." I looked at the box of bathroom supplies in his hands, then at the open door to my old basement apartment. "It's no joke," I said. I let a small, tight smile touch my lips. "But you're welcome to apply to rent the basement. The rate has gone up, of course." Then I turned my back on them, walked up the front steps, and unlocked the door to my new house, leaving my stunned, speechless family standing on the lawn. I didn't get to enjoy the silence for long. The front door hadn't even clicked shut behind me before the shouting started. It was my mother's voice, high and furious, followed by the heavy thud of her fist against the wood. "Nicole Marie Benson, you open this door right now. You don't get to do this to your family." I leaned against the door, taking a deep, steadying breath. I could hear Dale yelling in the background, a string of curses aimed at me, at Madison, at the sold sign. Angelina was making frantic shushing noises, more concerned with what the neighbors would think than the implosion of her new family. Through it all, my father was silent. I waited a full minute, letting them burn off the initial shock. Then I opened the door. They were all clustered on the porch, my mother's face red with fury. "How could you?" she hissed. "How could you be so deceitful? So cruel." "Cruel?" I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Was it cruel when you gave me 1 week to get out of my home? Or was that just a good push? "That was different," Dale shouted, stepping forward. "We're family." "You don't pull this kind of crap on family." "You seem to have a very flexible definition of what you can and can't do to family," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "It seems to depend entirely on which family member you are." "We gave you a place to live for 7 years," my mother cried, shifting to her favorite tactic. Guilt. We supported you, and this is how you repay us? By making your own parents homeless? This was the moment, the one I had been waiting for. I held up a hand. Let's be very clear about something. You weren't supporting me. I was supporting you, she scoffed. Oh, please. That little bit of rent you paid? A little bit of rent? I pulled a folded piece of paper from my back pocket. It was a printout of the last 12 months of my bank transfers to my father's account, next to a column showing their monthly mortgage payment. I handed it to her. I was paying 80% of your mortgage. Not to mention the new water heater, the electrical panel, and half a dozen other things you conveniently forgot you never paid me back for. You weren't my safety net. I was yours. My mother stared at the paper, her face draining of color. My father, who was still sitting on the steps, finally looked up. He wouldn't meet my eyes, but he didn't deny it. He couldn't. Dale snatched the paper from my mother's hand. He scanned it, his bravado crumbling into confusion. This can't be right. The ledger doesn't lie, Dale, I said. Then I looked past him, my gaze landing on Angelina, who was watching the scene unfold with wide, horrified eyes. And speaking of things that aren't right, it's amazing what you can learn about people when you start digging. Crypto investments, non-existent businesses. It's a messy world out there. Angelina went rigid. The color drained from her face, leaving 2 bright spots of blush on her cheeks. She knew exactly what I was talking about. Dale, however, was oblivious. What are you talking about? What crypto? I just held Angelina's gaze, letting the threat hang in the air between us. I wouldn't expose her, not unless I had to. The knowledge was enough. The power was in the potential for detonation, not the explosion itself. She swallowed hard and took a half step back, away from Dale. My mother, seeing she'd lost the financial argument, tried one last time. This is still our home. We raised you here, and I'm grateful for the good parts of that, I said, and I meant it. But this house is now my property. I'm happy to discuss rental terms with you and Dad. The basement is also available for Dale and Angelina. I'll even offer a family discount. The sheer audacity of my offer stunned them into silence again. They stared at me as if I'd grown a second head. The idea of paying rent to me, of living in my house under my rules, was so far outside their reality that they couldn't even process it. You can't be serious, Dale finally whispered. I've never been more serious in my life, I replied. I looked at my parents, at the 2 people who were supposed to protect me. For the first time, I think they truly saw me, not as their disappointing daughter, but as a stranger who held all the cards. I let the silence sit for a moment longer before I delivered the final blow. It wasn't loud or angry. It was just the quiet, painful truth. You taught me how to survive, I said, my voice clear and steady. I just never expected I'd have to survive you. With that, I stepped back inside. I closed the door on their shocked faces, turned the deadbolt, and leaned against it, the click of the lock echoing in the suddenly empty house. 2 months later, the house was quiet. It was a deep, settled quiet that felt entirely different from the tense silence that used to hang in the air when my family was home. I had moved my things out of storage and into the upstairs master bedroom. Sleeping in my parents' old room felt strange at first, like a violation of some unspoken rule, but now it was just my room. They never took me up on my offer to rent. Of course they didn't. Their pride wouldn't allow it. The day after the confrontation on the porch, they packed their things and left without a word. My mother left a single scathing note on the kitchen counter. I hope you're happy. From what I've gathered through the grapevine, they're staying with my aunt 2 hours away. Dale and Angelina's perfect start imploded spectacularly. I never had to use the information from Cameron. The revelation that the family failure, was secretly the one holding everything together, was a blow Dale's ego couldn't withstand. He and Angelina are crashing on a friend's sofa. Their plans for a sage green sanctuary indefinitely postponed. I haven't spoken to any of them. Tonight, Madison was over. We were sitting on the back deck, my back deck, sharing a bottle of wine. The late summer air was warm, and the sky was filled with stars. "So how does it feel?" she asked, swirling the wine in her glass. "To be queen of the castle?" I looked around at the familiar backyard, the big oak tree I used to climb as a kid, the flower beds my dad had so carefully tended. It was all mine, but the victory didn't taste as sweet as I thought it would. "It feels empty," I admitted. "I thought I'd feel triumphant, powerful, but mostly I just feel unburdened." Madison nodded, understanding. "You didn't just buy a house, Nick. You bought your freedom. It's okay if that feels a little lonely at first. You spent your whole life with their noise in your head. It'll take time to get used to the quiet." She was right. The revenge had been a means to an end. It was a loud, dramatic severing of ties that should have been cut years ago. The house was the prize, but the silence was the reward. It was a blank slate, and while it was intimidating, it was also mine to fill. We finished the wine, talking about her latest real estate nightmare and my plans to repaint the living room. It was normal, easy, a friendship that didn't require ledgers or secret tests of loyalty. When she left, the quiet of the house settled around me again, but this time it felt less like an absence and more like peace. A week later, the mail came. Tucked between a credit card offer and a water bill was a small plain envelope with my name written in my father's familiar shaky handwriting. There was no return address. My hands trembled a little as I opened it. Inside wasn't a letter full of anger or a plea for forgiveness. It was a single sheet of notepaper. 4 words were written on it. "Thank you for the roses." At first, I didn't understand. Then I remembered. The day after they left, I'd noticed my mother's prize-winning rose bushes were starting to wilt. On instinct, I had gone out and watered them. I'd been watering them every few days since, a habit ingrained from years of helping my dad in the garden. He must have driven by. He must have seen me. Tucked behind the note was a photograph. It was old and faded, the corners soft with age. It was a picture of me, maybe 12 years old, standing in this very yard, holding a green watering can. I was smiling, a genuine, uncomplicated smile, my face turned toward the sun as I watered a patch of bright red flowers. Tears pricked my eyes. It wasn't an apology, not really. It wasn't a solution, but it was an acknowledgement, a quiet admission from the man who was always silent that he saw me. Not as a victor or a villain, but as the daughter who still watered the garden. I put the photo on my new mantelpiece, right in the center. The house was still quiet, the echoes of my family still lingering in the corners if I listened too hard. But looking at that picture, I finally understood. I didn't win a war. I just stopped losing.